Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and to our live stream Q&A, Ask Me Anything, where a historian, anything you'd like about history and social sciences. Give me 1 second as I plug in my microphone, and we are underway just after 7:30 on the East Coast. And for the next hour, I'll be answering everything, all of your yens, all of your queries about history and social sciences as we do every Friday and Saturday here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel on YouTube. We're getting a bit of a late start today. I wanted to start earlier, mainly because of finally fixing the internet issues we've been having. Plugged in a new router or a new booster to the internet today. Any funds that are given to this channel, we use to support this channel. So the microphone plugged in, and I'm going to put on my smoke jacket that transforms me from just regular friendly neighborhood history into History Hefner. The smoking jacket was a popular British phenomenon in the 19th century as officers returning from the Ottoman Empire and fighting in the Crimean War would don them so that the Turkish tobacco they had brought with them would not get all over their regular clothes and leave a stench and all of that. So I'm very sorry that you have the Spanish flu or influenza. The Spanish did not invent the flu. The Spanish flu was one of the largest global pandemics in human history, and it was not probably invented in Spain. It probably originated in the trenches of a Great War, World War II, or what you might call World War I. But because of censorship of press and overemphasis on the war in most of Europe, it was first reported in Spain in 1918, and that is why, of course, it is called the Spanish flu. So anyways, I'm going to pick a nice historical background. I hope everybody is having a great weekend. Please like and subscribe and become a friendly neighborhood historian. To do so, you can just, like I said, like and subscribe. It's as easy as all of that. And hopefully we can make up for yesterday and my lag and internet issues because now we have a new booster, we got a new network working, and it should be a lot better for all of you. And hopefully it's a great experience for you, as I know it will be for me, to have you here and to be answering all of your questions about history, social sciences, and the like. Excuse me. Let's see, trying to pick a nice, good historical background. And we will go with, let's see. I also have a long form video coming out. It usually comes out Friday, but I'm going to send it out tonight about the Supreme Court. That's a series I've been doing for everyone. And my Industrial Revolution videos are on the way as well, and that's for members only. And those are all long form videos. We have long form content every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and and short form content every day, releasing here on the channel, and live streams every Friday and Saturday, usually at 6 Eastern, and then Sundays the live stream lecture is at 4 p.m. Eastern, and our topic is going to be Hanukkah, a topic I wished to lecture on before but wasn't able to. And you know what? We will go with this image. This is the image of Lord Vishnu. Or actually, I don't like it's too blurry, but it was what Lord Vishnu of India. You know what? We'll pick this one. This is Brahma with his many faces, which is a chart that explains the caste system of India. So there we are. Thank you so much, Emir, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Any tips on how to get over it? Hot tea with lemon always helps me, always makes me feel better. It's not about getting over it, it's just about feeling better. So this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. A very good evening to all of you, and welcome to our live stream Q&A where you can ask me anything you'd like about history or social sciences for the next hour or so. And please like and subscribe for more historical content that you get only exclusively here. And this is not AI. Believe it or not, my information about history may be encyclopedic, but it's not necessarily artificially intelligence. It doesn't rely on Wikipedia. It doesn't rely on things like that. It is me learning about information, gathering information, and retelling as much as I possibly can. And indeed, we are going to be on for maybe 67 minutes. We'll find out what's going on. So, what is the history of St. Basil's Basilica? You mean in St. Petersburg? St. Basil's Basilica. St. Basil's Basilica was built as every capital city in Europe and even in the United States. New York has this too, has a large cathedral dedicated to a particular saint. You have the Russian Orthodox dedicating their cathedral in St. Basil's built. I forget when it was built, but St. Petersburg itself, Peter the Great started construction on it in 1703 during his Northern War against the Swedish to create a fortification and a new capital. His window on the west, on the Baltic, St. Petersburg became one of the most beautiful and renowned capitals in all of Europe. So, watch an interesting video, YouTube video. Thank you for the super chat about every president's favorite food. Any comments on that? No, a lot of presidents, especially modern presidents like Trump and Bill Clinton, have really, really loved fast food and McDonald's and stuff like that. I think that's one of Trump's favorite meals. I think it was Bill Clinton's favorite meal was McDonald's. I'd have to look into that and watch a video. But I've seen that advertised before, and I should watch it and maybe react to it. And now that we have a laptop, again, a nice new laptop for the channel, I can start doing reaction videos and video streams. We'll be seeing more of that during the holidays as a gift to all of you. A very happy holiday season for you, for whatever you're celebrating or not celebrating. We just hope you're celebrating history here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. What is the history? What is the history of the Bible? The Bible. That's a large and long question, Dino Nugget. But basically, the Bible is a compilation of books, of which different Christian churches have different numbers of books. And of course, the Hebrew Bible is in reference to what's called the Tanakh, which is the ancient writings of the Jewish people that were formalized and contextualized by Jewish rabbinic schools during Second Temple Judaism and even afterwards, that are what most people in the West call the Old Testament. But the Torah is one of the ways the Jews refer to it. The Old Testament was written anytime between the 15th century BC all the way till about the 1st century BC, with writings going on about Moses and the Exodus, the creation story, Adam and Eve. All of those accounts are found in the Old Testament. There's historical accounts, there's mythological accounts, there's poetic accounts, there's wisdom literature like the book of Proverbs, for instance, written by various different people with traditional and historical attributions given to some of the most important figures in the ancient Israelite religion. So people like Moses, David, and Solomon have a particular preference for receiving authorship of books like Exodus, Psalms, or the Song of Solomon. These are attributed to them. The New Testament is written within about 100 years of the life of Jesus of Nazareth, the first century Jewish Messiah, Jewish rabbi who claimed to be the Messiah, and he, of course, it depicts his life, his death, and the most perhaps controversial historical aspect is the name that he rose from the dead. His followers then start the church. This is the Acts of the Apostles, and they are written by various leaders of the early church, like Paul and Peter, as well as Luke. And some believe that they are written anywhere between 50 AD and about 130 AD, so about an 80-year window of writings about Jesus, his followers, their teachings and their beliefs. It details the persecution that Christians would often face at the hands of Jewish communities as well as the Romans, and it, of course, depicts the life of some of the earliest saints of the Christian church. This group of texts was debated about as well and compiled and eventually became standard around the third or fourth centuries, as the Christian church was eventually able to receive the recognition of the Roman Empire and the long-term systematic persecutions of the church ended. Christians were able to organize councils and meetings to clarify their positions on various issues, and they used the biblical text from both the Old and New Testament as verification for their teachings and ideas. And of course, the printing press allowed the Bible to be printed at a much greater volume if you're talking about the modern world. And of course, the first thing ever printed on the printing press was Gutenberg's Bible in 1447. So there's a quick history of the Bible. There's a lot more, obviously, that I could go into and things like that. Again, you had the Christian communities eventually deciding on what the texts were, as well as the Jewish communities deciding on what the texts were of their ancient Jewish writings. Of course, the Hebrew Bible is written mainly in Hebrew, although there is a famous Greek translation of it that was supposedly copied down based off of ancient Hebrew text and translated into Greek by 70 rabbis, which is called the Septuagint. This would have been the Greek version of the Bible referenced by the early New Testament leaders in the Christian church. And of course, the New Testament is, like I said, written down over the centuries. So, and they're codified by different schools and leaders of the different religious communities that are in there. Protestant Christians took the Jewish canon, the approved canonized books of the Jewish communities, whereas Catholics and Orthodox Christians accepted extra books that are called the Deuterocanonical books that include the story of Hanukkah, which I will be lecturing on tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. So check that out, please. Let me see. Anyways, we are doing Q&A. Sorry that I went on that, but that was a really good question, and they asked, and I think it's their first time here, so I wanted to give him a nice introduction to the channel. So like and subscribe for more. Are you off at powder? Yes, I am. Let's see. It's in Moscow. Oh, in Moscow. St. Basil's. Oh, you're referring to St. Basil's the Great. Okay, so that's not the one I'm thinking of. I'm the one with the rotunda. St. Basil's is the one built by Ivan Grozny, better known as Ivan the Terrible, Ivan IV, who decided to become the first Russian Tsar. Built St. Basil's as commemoration of his victory at Astrakhan against the Tatars in Tartaria, which is a huge victory for the Muscovites, or the early Russians, if you want to call them that. The first Tsar supposedly blinded the architect so he could never build another great feat like that. I think it's built in the early 1560s. There you go. What else? What is the history behind the rising of the flag over Berlin by the Soviets? The Americans actually allowed the Soviets to arrive at Berlin first. That was part of the agreement made at Yalta in January of 1945. Yeah. I don't know exactly. It was a way of achieving dominance. Of course, Berlin is in what becomes known as East Germany, but the city itself is sequestered between East and West, just like the rest of the country is. And Berlin is the ancient historical and cultural capital of the German people. So, what is the history of lunatic lefties in America? I don't know. Ask the lunatics on the right. Let me see here. I don't think there's any historical evidence that Moses ever existed. There's no historical evidence necessarily that any of many of these figures existing. There's nothing to the contrary. There's no necessary contradictions. There is evidence of a Jewish exodus, of the exodus of the Hebrews that left Egypt in sometime during the New Kingdom, which would put them somewhere near a biblical exodus. The accounts of the Bible are varied in their different genres. You have narratives that tell stories, some of which are more mythological, some of which are more supposed to be histories. You have historical accounts like the books of the Kings, and the Acts of the Apostles would be in that category. You have you have poetry, parables, wisdom literature. Those things could be far more allegorical, far more lyrical. This is where the whole debate about creationism and evolution comes in, and Christians have been dealing with this for a while, where obviously you're not looking at the early beginnings of the creation story through the lens of evolutionary science, and it's not meant to be written that way either. It is an account of how God brought chaos out of order and created the world, and it exists in the legends of many of the different peoples of those regions, like the Mesopotamians and even the Egyptians. So yes. There's not any concrete historical evidence that people like Moses existed, but there is a concrete evidence of an exodus of Jewish people. There is some evidence that would lead us to believe of a Jewish exodus from Egypt around that particular time during the New Kingdom in Egypt, and of them settling the land of Canaan, defeating the Canaanites, and setting up a confederacy that would later become a kingdom. There is evidence of the Davidic kingdom. Of course, part of that would involve the building of Solomon's temple in the 10th century. Let me see here. I can't believe Harry is crashing out over hot versus iced tea, by the way. Is it true that the Catholic religion is the first Christian religion church? Oh, Pico side. That's a loaded question, but it's good to see. It's been a while, and if you're enjoying the history we're talking about, we don't always talk about religious history, but religion and history go a lot in the way, so I don't mind answering that. I actually would prefer, if you want to talk about politics or religion and get me analyzing those topics, a super chat. Catholicism is one of the Christian churches that claims an ancient connection to a direct ancient connection to the teachings of Jesus and his first followers, believing that Peter was appointed by Jesus to be the first leader of the Christian church, and of course becoming the Bishop of Rome would entitle him to be known as the Holy Father or Papa or Pope. And that is a claim that has been debated by Protestants and Catholics for centuries, and with Orthodox communities believing that that Peter may have well been in that position, but does not retain. But the Roman Church, the Pope, is not the definitive leader of the Christian Church the way the Catholic Church sees him as that. What would it look like if the Ottomans were still in power? Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. The Ottomans were in decline throughout much of the 19th century, and of course were decimated during the Great War by the Russians and then the Greeks with the aid of the British. But the truth, and then of course the Palestinians and the Arabs revolting, and the British helping them through men like not T.S. Eliot, T.E. Lawrence, made a huge change. The Ottoman Empire was shrinking in influence and power. I don't know what it would be like. They were a very metropolitan, relatively tolerant, especially for their day, society that was extremely successful at military conquest and siege warfare. Um, I think there would be a lot more. There wouldn't be a modern Middle East. The modern Middle East is created in the wake of the Europeans realigning the different areas of the Middle East of former Ottoman provinces into independent areas that were at least initially semi-governed by the Europeans. This included mandates in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and of course Palestine. Um, it would be we wouldn't have the modern Middle Eastern states. I don't know that we would have the modern Middle Eastern conflict. Although, to be fair, the Ottomans warred with the Safavid Persians for centuries during the 17th and 18th centuries, because of them being Shia Muslims versus the Ottomans who were Sunni. Um, yeah, it's definitely true that the Catholic religion is the first Christian religion. Hmm. Is that a depiction of Janus behind you? No, this is Brahma. This is the many faces of Brahma, and this is in reference to my video on the Indian caste or Varna system, which I made a few months ago, which you can check out only here on YouTube. Hars, if you can put my wonderful moderator Hars will hopefully put the link to that video where you can learn about how the caste system emerged and the development of Hinduism in India in general. So iced tea tastes good. I think that's yes. You can testify to that. Are we in Q&A? Yes, we are. Let me see here. Are we really still debating tea? I don't have an OnlyFans. I mean, if I had an OnlyFans, it'd be videos of me wearing this, talking about history. There, and I would ruin OnlyFans for everybody. Why did they? It would be a total rage bait on my part. Why did they even start writing in the vernacular, especially the Bible? What do you mean vernacular in the Bible? Do you mean like Do you mean like during the Renaissance and Reformation, when the Europeans start writing start translating the Bible from Latin, the major language of the church, into different various regional languages, of course, like German, English, and French. The main reason for doing this is an emphasis in the Renaissance on humanism and on human experience and human identity, and the ability of the human to educate himself is a huge part of Renaissance ethos, and this impacts the thinking of the Reformation, which believes that that individuals and peoples of different nations should be able to read the Bible and access that information in a personal way, and that, of course, means reading it in their own language. What is the lesson we can learn from the Spanish Civil War? There is no splendid little war like the Americans like to think, and America had just as many imperial aspirations as the French or the British at the turn of the 20th century. Sometimes Americans make tea in microwaves or heat up tea bags in microwaves. I brew tea. I have a German samovar. I've got a couple videos on it, and I've talked about tea many times, but I love tea. It's fascinating. Let me see. Who's talking about tea? It's not a conversation that's basically just shouting. Yes, basically. Let me see. More of a direct question. How does your memory keep up with the level of historical information you know? Is studying that powerful, or is it something else? I tend to have a good memory at remembering things, different facts, and gathering them in my head. But I also just really love what I do. And if you love what you do, you're more likely to remember it, in my opinion. Yes, the story of the Great Flood is indeed in many ancient writings. Different versions, of course, from Gilgamesh to Zeus destroying the world in a flood, of course, to Noah and the ark. Do you think that Jesus floated away? If so, why did he do that? If not, what was the origin of the story? It's an idea that God dwells above us, so that's where the ascension idea comes from after Jesus' resurrection in the Gospels. Um, Let me see. Putin is saving Russia from the corruption of the West. Putin is the corruption of the West. Um, I think communism historically is worse than fascism in scale, total death, and suffering. Yes, except that communism has been tried more often and has had more time to actually cause human suffering. I think history proves the horseshoe political theory to be true, and both lead to both are authoritarian, both are socialistic in the sense, or communistic in the sense that they create an oppressive government that runs everything, where party identity or national identity in the case of fascism is the guiding factor. Mussolini did not like the socialism that believed in global revolution. He was much more into socialism in one country based on a national identity, and Hitler and the Nazis picked this up. These men had all been socialists. Of course, Stalin believed in socialism in one country, and used that as a cudgel against Trotsky during the power struggle during the after the Russian Revolution. Let me see. Come on, iced tea, even you've got to agree that it should never exist. Yes, just like the British Empire doesn't exist anymore. Iced tea has outlasted the British Empire, so who cares? How much of modernity is owed to the efforts of the Young Turks? Well, which Young Turks are you referring to? The Young Turks were a revolutionary group which tried to radically reform the Turkish government following in the demise of and the power vacuum of a crumbling Ottoman Empire following the Great War. They actually didn't get that far. Ataturk reinforced the Islamic history and power of Turkey. The Islamic Republic renamed Constantinople Istanbul. The Ottomans had not named it Istanbul. That was a Turkish reimagination. I don't think hardly any of modernity is owed to the Young Turks, other than the fact that you have a revolutionary group running around trying to radicalize and liberalize a society after the Great War, which was common in many, many parts of the world. Why were the Young Turks called that? And who were they? They were a younger generation of revolutionaries in Turkey in the early 20th century who pushed for constitutionalism and liberalism. Were the Federalists better or the Democratic Republicans? Those are the two early political parties in America. Who was better? Depends on what kind of government you wanted. If you wanted a strong centralized government that emphasized cooperation with large businesses and mercantile establishments in New England, you were most likely a Federalist. These were regional parties. The Democratic Republicans had much more sway in the South, emphasizing individual liberties and Jefferson's ideal of the yeoman farmer. It was a vision of who would lead the young America to glory. Eventually, the Democratic Republicans won out. They mainly became the Democrats, although opponents to Andrew Jackson's takeover of the party became known as Whigs, who were much more influenced by former Federalist elements, and that is the influence that becomes the Republican Party in the 1850s. Let me see. Who was the better president, Franklin Roosevelt or John F. Kennedy? Good question. A lot of people will say Roosevelt for the sake of tenure, longevity, and his accomplishments between the creation of Social Security, the New Deal, the ending of the Great Depression, and of course the victory in the World War. I would say Kennedy is the better president. I think he gets more. I think he doesn't get more done, but proportionally, if he had been president for 12 years, he would have been more successful. I think he's a better leader. I think he does a better job on certain matters. I think Roosevelt does an excellent job handling the war, but I don't think the economy is fixed by Roosevelt's policies. Roosevelt did horrible things. The internment of the Japanese is a huge scar against him. I think Kennedy had accomplished a lot in a short amount of time, and remains to be seen of what would have happened had he remained president. And the chaos of the 1960s can be laid at the fact that he was assassinated in one of the most horrific murders in American history. Let me see here. Let me see. Why bin Laden hated the U.S.? Bin Laden was actually funded the Mujahideen by the U.S. when he helped to overthrow a Soviet-backed government in Afghanistan in the 1980s. But he hated commercialism and secularism and capitalism and Christianity just as much as he hated communism, and turned on the United States after they were no longer of use to him. Where does one find a smoking jacket in 2025? Well, you found it here. You can order them, and this was given to me by a dear follower of the channel, and it has become one of the modicums that I use to represent the channel. So when I put this on, I become History Hefner. Let me see. Are you Scrat from the Ice Age movie? No, I'm Patrick from SpongeBob. Let me see here. Hello, Magnus. My life is not a lie. And thank you so much. Where did the idea of high fantasy concepts like wizards and elves come from? Magic. Alchemy, ancient lore, the idea of trying to, again, a lot of these things are ancient and are ways people try to explain mystical occurrences. You have legends of wizards and fairy-like creatures in societies all over the world. And our understandings of elves, dwarves, wizards, what eventually becomes codified in The Lord of the Rings, the greatest trilogy of all time, fight me on it, is the fact that, and Tolkien, and then Jackson, of course, gives us the movie versions. This is Tolkien taking from ancient English and Celtic myths and marrying them with ancient Germanic myths, So very Eurocentric understanding of elves being these almost like fairy-like creatures, wizards having these mystical powers and being old men with beards, and their interactions with men and things like that. Those are all reinterpretations, and dwarves have been part of that too, of ancient people. And they're actually allegorical for different racial groups at different times. Tolkien believed that the dwarves represented the Jews, for instance. So there's a little bit of that as well. What was the most decisive naval battle of the American Civil War? I'm trying to remember Farragut's battle. It's one of the blockades where the Union was able to blockade one of the main Confederate ports. Basically, just by outproducing the Confederates, the Union was able to win the naval war. Although the Confederates were the first to produce the ironclads, and the Union caught up to them. And I think the Union was using submarines in that war. I think, I'm not sure. Convert to one true religion, Judaism. It's the only right religion. That's fascinating. I've never had someone tell me to convert to Judaism. So let me see. Candace Owens accused the Jews of being responsible for the slave trade. Here we go again. Saying they created it, funded it, and had the most slaves on her last show. Is there any truth to that? No, she's an idiot. I'm sorry. People come onto this channel with all the Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens nonsense thrown on between two slices of bread and throw it right at me when I don't honor them as historical figures. There's no historical evidence of that at all. Have Jews engaged in slavery? Absolutely. The Jewish people's creation of their society is one of escaping from slavery, which Owens, as a Christian, should understand, but she doesn't care about that because she's warped. I'm sorry, and I know that's an opinion, but this is totally historical. No. To say the Jews are responsible for the slave trade is like saying the Americans are responsible for the British colonizing India. There's so little that has to do with it that it's actually asinine. The Arab slave trade existed in the sub-Saharan regions of Africa, as many of these areas converted to Islam. Muslim and Islamic traders and Arabic traders would go. Muslims cannot enslave fellow Muslims, but they would enslave opposite-viewed Muslims. Sunnis would enslave Shiites, for instance. But they'd also enslave native Africans who would not convert to Islam and trade them. And when the Europeans showed up, the African kingdoms were already benefiting from slavery, and the Europeans just internationalized it and made it an intercontinental thing. But to say the Jews created the Arabic slave trade is absurdity, and it sounds like something that Qatar would pay her to say, if that rumor is true. So, and this is the same woman who believes a woman whose husband was shot in front of the entire country is an actress who has benefited from his death and is evil. So I don't really think that we should take her seriously. She's allowed to have her historical opinions, but she doesn't provide facts. She provides, well, what if? And I know that this is happening because I've read a source. I'm not going to say what the source is right now. I can't say what the source is right now, but it proves that I'm true. And then evidence is provided. No, that evidence is false. This is what, once you start down conspiracy road, you get there. What is the timelines from the Crimean War to the Turkish Balkan Wars fight right before the Great War? The Russians lose the Crimean War in a big surprise. They were shocked that the French and British would help a Muslim country against them. But to keep the balance of power in Europe, the British and the French decided they did not want the Russians seizing a large section of the Balkans, which leads, of course, to the Russians' defeat at the hands of the Turks. But throughout the rest of the 19th century, the Europeans were perfectly willing to allow the Russians to beat the tar out of the Ottomans in several different wars under Alexander II, Alexander III, and then the Balkan Wars were a series of nationalist movements supported by the Russians and others, where different areas of the Balkans got independence from the Turks. This had started with the Greeks and their revolution in 1832, when they became a nation, and just nationalism inspired the Serbs. It inspired the Bosnians. The Bosnians were then absorbed by the Austro-Hungarians, which wasn't how you were supposed to get your independence. The Bulgarians get their independence. These different areas in the Balkans just chip away at Ottoman supremacy to the point where the Ottoman presence in the Balkans is very muted by the time we get to the beginning of the Great War. But you also have different wars, and the Austro-Hungarians and the Russians trying to control as much either directly or indirectly of the area as they can. So that's the Turkish Balkan Wars, and the Turks trying to retake it. So you have three empires converging on these areas with a rise of nationalism. You're creating a powder keg that will blow up. You ally that with literally with the alliances that the Europeans set up for themselves at the end of the 19th century, and it almost is predictable that you'll have some sort of explosion that leads to the Great War. The reason the Germans allow the Austro-Hungarians to do what they do in attacking Serbia, which brings Russia into the war, is because the Kaiser was very worried that Russia, although significantly backwards in industrialization compared to the Germans, French, and British, would in a few years have the manpower and resources and industrialization necessary so that they'd be unbeatable. So for him, it was a now or never sort of thing. And the Russians were certainly aware of this as well. So we were talking about history and social studies. Jenna, welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Why would the British even side with the Ottomans against the Russians in the Crimean War? I answered, at least I think I did. Balance of power, keeping the Russians from getting too much. Basically, between 1815 and 1914, the Europeans for basically a century were perfectly fine with each other colonizing certain areas of the rest of the world, but fighting on the continent for large swaths of land, there needed to be a balance. No power could become too great. Let me see here. What were the more geopolitical issues before Ferdinand was killed than there is currently? I think I kind of answered that. Franz Ferdinand, the Austro-Hungarian heir to the throne, the nephew of the emperor, Franz Josef, who was killed at Sarajevo on June 28th, 1914. So thanks, I guess. White teeth, fat lips, whatever. This is the concept of substantive due process consistent with the intent of the framers' historical precedent. Kind of. The framers believed in due process, and they get that from English common law. Most of the ideas the founders had came from an amalgamation of British, Roman, and Greek political philosophy. Thoughts on Antifa and Black Panther? There's a broad brush attempt by the right to associate these different left-wing activist groups with violence and political anarchy, and some of them are indeed anarchic, or given to anarchism, but not all of them do. And some of them are the Black Panthers and the Antifa. Will be quick to point out their social and communal activism as well as their more and disavow more violent elements of it. I don't have everything as my field of expertise, but history is certainly my strong stance. Hello, Dabone. Good to see you. What if Nixon had to handle the Cuban Missile Crisis? I don't know that you would have had the Cuban Missile Crisis with Nixon. And the reason I say that is Nixon had a hardline anti-Soviet approach. If Nixon had been elected in 1960, you don't necessarily have the Cuban Missile Crisis because Khrushchev wouldn't have seen Nixon as callow as he did Kennedy and wouldn't have put missiles in Cuba, and Nixon might not have messed up the Bay of Pigs. Nixon might have liberated Cuba in 61, or caused a world war. It's quite possible. Reason Kennedy held back on the Bay of Pigs or Bayou de Cochinos was because he didn't want to cause a world war with the Soviets getting involved. Hello, Dominique. Let me see here. What questions? Hi, Faraz. Good to see you. Remember that episode where SpongeBob reads in his library? Yes. Thank you, Roman. I'm glad you like it here. Candace Owens is a whitey wannabe. Well, I was at the most recent white people convention. We have them every year around this time. And we all voted unanimously. All white people everywhere voted unanimously not to have her. This isn't white people rhetoric. This is, I don't even know what it is. I think the right has lost its mind. Now that someone talked about Judaism, I personally am a big critic of all Abrahamic religions, that its roots in me growing up under a theocracy. That's a fair point. If you grow up under a theocracy of any of those, you are going to run into an issue. And although the Jewish religion never really had a theocracy, the Christians and Muslims certainly have. Let me see. What do you think will happen with Ukraine and Russia if they don't agree to peace? Endless war, Russia bullying them out of land, perhaps even Europe getting involved and trying to take out Putin. But a war in Russia, nobody wants to really risk that, Jenna. Eenie Miney, you said Candace really does have a doorstop of a brain. It's not Candace that I'm worried about. It's her followers that I'm worried about. The people that continue to platform this woman, they give her attention after she says horrible things about Erica Kirk. Those are the people that I think have a real problem. I don't think that she has problems, but the fact that people are willing to just eat this up, and that we are just at the point where we're willing to say we don't care about the Holocaust anymore, we hate Israel, the point where we're just like, free us from thinking, free us from the ability to reason and to rationally deal with things in the excuse of asking questions just to cause trouble. That is far more frightening, because a large enough segment of the population on the right is willing to do this. And for that matter, the left is willing to do this either. I mean, Hassan Piker is not that different. Destiny is not that different. The left and the right both have problems with their streamers, I would say, and their podcasters. I'm not biased I don't think I'm biased in religion. I try to be as fair as I can. I don't share my religious perspectives. Where am I biased in religion? Even you've got to admit, the American colonials were the ones is really governing British India, and Christians didn't. Jews funded it. What are we talking about? Jews did not fund the Arab slave trade. Were there Jews who were involved with it because they lived in the Ottoman Empire and the other empires of the time? Certainly. Were there Jews who had slaves? Certainly. That's again like saying Columbus started the Arab slave trade. Columbus never enslaved a single African. I know that's not kosher, no pun intended. That's not politically correct enough to say these days, but Columbus wanted to enslave natives, not Africans. And part of the reason he wanted to do that was to convert them to Christianity, and part of the reason he thought it was okay to do it was because they were enslaving each other and eating each other. Look at the Tainos and the Caribs. The bottom of the cult barrel MAGA's justification for their leader and themselves is truly breathtaking and super Christ-like. The fact that your handle is MAGA has peaked is quite fascinating. There are many, many people who are on the left and the right who do not have that kind of mentality. And many of them are on this channel because they think reasonably. And I have people all the time supporting and hating the president, and it's perfectly fine. I've been to Chad, the African country, and there are no African people. They are all Asian, Middle Eastern, and European. Chad's a big country. I don't think you spent that much time there. What is one nice thing you have to say about Candace Owens? Let me see. I never thought I would question. She's captivating in the sense that she gets people to question, like, basic fundamental things you can see with your eyes. She exposed Brigitte Macron not as a man, because Brigitte Macron is not a man, but as something else that has to do with adults and children, or at least teenagers. At this point, I think that someone should start a rumor that Candace is a man, and then just do what she does and watch her lose her mind. That would be hilarious to me. Okay, let's go to my questions. Indo-Europeans, you think is a genetic group, linguistic, or cultural? All three. I think any genetic group is going to develop a language and a culture. You're wearing maroon. So you kill chart. Yes. Fascinating. Are you also interested in languages? Yes, but not a lot. Don't know a huge amount. Let me see here. The CSN Confederates launched the first sub-to-sink warship. That sub was raised. That's right. So submarines were indeed used during that. I mean, the Gatling gun, trench warfare, all used during that time. Well before the Great War. 50 years before. Let me see here. What's one nice thing anyone can say about Trump besides being good at leading a cult to total stupidity? Don't underestimate the total stupidity of humans, as Einstein said. Now that someone mentioned Charlie Kirk, while I condemn his tragic murder, the fact that he is assassinated does not mean to agree with things he said or even believe he was a good person. Yeah. Same with Rob Reiner. Same with anyone who is murdered, especially murdered in such a horrible way. People dying naturally, even when they're young, is tragic. People dying at an old age is sad, but understandable. People being murdered at an old or a young age in horrific fashion is just absolutely galling. Let me see here. Friendly history. Can you say, yes, in an evil Bond villain voice? Your clothing fits. Yes. Why did the Austro-Hungarians rise, and why were they bound to fall by the Great War? I don't know if they were bound to fall. I don't believe in inevitability in history, Hars, but the Austro-Hungarians were basically Austria's attempt, the Habsburgs' attempt, to continue to seek relevance in an ever-changing European landscape that had left them behind. The unification of Germany by the Prussians had weakened Austria's standing. And Austria had had many hits during the 19th century. The dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire was the first one by Napoleon. The Habsburgs were losing influence. This had been the most dominant political family in Europe for 3 centuries, and by the middle of the 19th century, they were quite weak. However, they still had Austria to prop up their support. Franz Joseph I, who saw the help of the Russian Tsar Nicholas I in the 1840s allow him to stay in power, married the daughter of the King of Hungary, and then became the King of Hungary in 1867, creating the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The problem with this empire is that you had Croats and Slavs and different peoples, Hungarians, or Magyars are the ethnic group, and different groups who didn't necessarily get along with one another, and one another kind of hated each other, and were forced to kind of live together. And using neo-absolutism and power and prestige in the history of the Habsburgs and their pageantry, Franz Joseph was able to rule over them in a pretty capable capacity for almost 70 years. But make no mistake, he lost many things. He lost his son taking his life. He lost his nephew. He lost almost all the ability he could to hold on to power by the time the Great War had started. The embarrassment when Italy gained independence and Austro-Hungary gained nothing. They lost several wars to the Prussians, who became the dominant power in the German Empire. There's the Austro-Hungarians were seeing their last chance as picking off Balkan powers, which is why they took over Bosnia in 1912 or 1907, I think. And then there's the Balkan Wars of 1912. So they rose out of necessity for the Austrians to remain relevant, but they got manhandled by the Russians, who were not a power. So they were a tertiary power by the time the Great War happened. You've got France, Britain, and the Germans are the main powers. Then you have Russia, which is a secondary power, who bullies the tertiary powers while getting bullied by the Germans, who are the primary power. What's quite fascinating and impressive is the fact that the Germans, kind of being the only main power in the Central Powers, the only major power comparable to Britain, France, and the United States, who came later, is that they were actually able to hold them off for as long as they did. The Germans deserve a lot of credit for that in their handling of the war, thanks to great generals like Hindenburg and Ludendorff. So, let me see here. This empire was an ethnic, religious mess. Any large-scale war at that time would have caused the total disintegration of the empire. Yes, but you got to give the Austro-Hungarians a little bit of credit that they were able to stay together as long as they did, and maybe that's just the power and the might of a Franz Joseph I kind of character. What do you think about the history of Sarah Payne? Sarah Payne? I don't know of the historian Sarah Payne. Haven't read her. Eric, great to see you. Thank you for the super chat. You look like my priest. Oh, I'm sorry, you had that experience. Was the birth of the United States really about an escape from tyranny? Yes. Kind of. Don't loads of American conservatives go nuts whenever the Supreme Court references the British common law or Roman law? Yes, conservatives are very pseudo-historical on certain matters. I'm more of a historian than you clown. Sure, go ahead. You're Jewish Latino. Keep guessing. I don't even really share my ethnicity that much. Let me see. Christmas is close. When you guys celebrate Christmas, we Persians celebrate Yalda. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. We need to ban Islam from the West, starting by voting in a government that is prepared to carry out action against these Islamic invaders. And what does that mean for the millions of Muslims who have lived in these countries for decades with generational family members? Do you think the moon landing was real? Oh, another Candace Owens question. Yes, I do. Can you talk a little bit about the origins of Christmas? Christmas was a paganic holiday that was reinterpreted by the Christians. It was originally, it is the birth of Horus in the ancient Egyptian calendar. It is also the birth of which figure? Saturn. It's a celebration of Saturnalia in the Roman holiday, and the Christians, once they became the dominant force in the Roman Empire socially, they said that was Christmas, although Christian writers had believed that Jesus had been born on December 25th for some time. So a little bit of syncretism as well as cultural change in the Roman Empire is how paganic Christmas traditions started to become more Christian. Odin, supposedly, the Norse god, supposedly rode around the world with reindeer on a sleigh, judging the hearts of men. He made a list of people and their deeds. But of course, the Santa Claus and many of Santa Claus' elements come from Saint Nicholas, who was a Christian bishop who did supposedly leave goods and gifts for people, made toys for children, and was known and supposedly in heaven has the job of checking the hearts of men by the design of the Lord. So there's English, Germanic, Anglo-Saxon, or Germanic peoples who settle England in the 5th century. These peoples obviously bring their traditions with them. Yule and things like that are Norse, and they are paganic. And those continue to influence Christmas down the line. But there is a strong, of course, there is a strong Christian element that has taken over the holiday, although the paganic celebrations were quite interesting as well. And you can watch and you can learn all about that when Hars puts in my video about the history of Christmas. So this Christmas season, warm up by the fire and listen to me talk to you about the different histories of Christmas. If Hars could put that in the chat, that would be great. If he could put my caste system video in the chat, that would be great. If he could put my video about the history of Hanukkah in the chat, that would be great. You can learn about that holiday, which is going on right now. Canada sounds more like a Nation of Islam leader, Louis Farrakhan, or a Black Hebrew Israelite than Whitey. Yes, kind of. They could be bots, to be fair. True. Columbus was a Jew. Columbus was indeed a Jew. Jews had many high positions in the Arab caliphates in the Ottoman Empire. Yes. So, that means they made the slave trade? The slave trade predated the Ottomans, by the way. What would have happened if the Russians made Tsar's Bomba 100 megaton instead of only 50? I heard the Russians almost built a super nuke the size of a warship, but never did. Probably used it for more intimidation, political power, and geopolitical influence, making the Cold War that much more difficult for the Americans to win. Let me see here. Hey, destroy. Any maybe... let me see. Well, I think you are biased because I think you are not critical towards them enough. Maybe we can have a debate on Zoom and I can explain to you why I think that way. Critical to what? Critical to religions? Am I not critical of religions enough? My job is not to offer my opinion on different religions or to offer critiques of religions. My job is to explain the historical significance of religious ideas and to judge them based off of moral values that they come up with. So, yeah, I don't know what you mean by that. My job isn't to be critical. I'm not a religious channel. AR-10. Have fun with that, Christopher. You're a man, right? You don't identify as a rhino or something weird? I identify as a historian. Yeah, you used to date Candace when she was known as Malvin. We know about Malvin Owens. Malvin Owens. There's pictures of Malvin Owens, but it looks like a boy. Korean War should be... The president have allowed a tampon? Should the president have allowed an invasion into China? I don't know. I don't know if the world would have been ready for another global world war. I don't know if the United States could have bullied its way to success. The Chinese had the willingness to continue to send wave of millions of soldiers into Korea. That was frightening enough, in my opinion. I think that Truman made the right call there. Let me see. How early has the United States used contracting groups for military purposes? Kind of a thing that really started, it was in the Great War, but the last World War, World War III in the 1940s, the United States did it more. So, government contractors working with the assembly lines to basically create contracting with these usual car and motor companies to create the machines that they needed for warfare. How did Europeans manage to outpace every society and civilization for centuries compared to the Chinese, Africans, or even the Middle East? Accumulation of resources through colonization is one way they did it. The development of a political identity that allowed the rights of individuals, creation of entrepreneurship and economic freedoms and opportunities. I think individualism helped the West a lot. I think a good culture and ethic helped the West a lot. But I also think, of course, you have to look at the influence of colonialism and things like that. What do you think Bondi attacked men? Complete shock for us Indians in that recent brutal killing of a Hindu Bangladeshi because of blasphemy. There is a definite problem with radical Islam and violence. I think Charlie Kirk was promoting Christianity, which is the worst thing anyone can do to a society, is I believe it to be a harmful religion. Yet again, that does not mean I am okay with his murder. Well, does promoting Christianity mean violence? I don't know what that means. And I'm sorry if I haven't caught up to the chat. I am going as quickly as I can. Hopefully you're all enjoying this. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to try to catch up, though. What do you think of King Leopold II? He worse than Hitler? He's definitely up there for one of the nastiest despots in history. King Leopold was the man who basically took over the Congo as his own personal colony, and for the extraction of palm oil and rubber, terrorized, mutilated, murdered, and oppressed the Belgians for decades. It got so bad that the international community eventually took the colony away from him and gave it to the Belgian government because he'd been so awful to the Congolese. Thank you for joining us. We have people from Eastern Europe and all over the world who join us at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. We love it. Do you have an explanation for why there are so many people who buy into everything Candace says? Millions of people agree with her. People do not think critically about these things, and people do not want to think critically about these things, so they just choose to think about them any way they want. What do you think of King Leopold? Oh, I already answered that. Pakistan has quite an interesting blasphemy law because you can get a death penalty, but the Supreme Court never upholds them. It's commuted to a life sentence. Interesting. Can you believe that Bangladesh, East Pakistan, more radical than West Pakistan? Not surprising. I don't know if that's fully true, but it's partly true. Yes, unfriendly future. That's funny, G-Man. I always vote for small government and what freedom I can get. What do you mean you don't share that? We can see that you're white. Yeah, I'm white. What do you mean I don't share what? There's plenty of different white people. I didn't get Christmas wrong. If you want to know the origins of Christmas, the Catholic Church has the answer for you to go look what they have to say about it. I'm talking about the Catholic Church. I'm talking about Christianity in Western Europe. Go and watch my video on it. And if Harsk would put it in the chat, then that would be very helpful, but he hasn't done it. So, and thank you, Emir. Is there a moon? Yes, and it's made out of cheese. Austro-Hungary bought Bosnia and Herzegovina for 2.5 million Turkish pounds at the beginning of the 20th century. Yep. Christmas was a celebration of the winter solstice. Yep. And Saturnalia, the sun god. Why you spread hate against blacks, browns, and natives? Clearly, I'm doing that. Yes, clearly spreading hate against blacks, browns, and natives. Are Halloween and Thanksgiving Christian holidays or no? Thanksgiving is. Halloween has some of that, but Samhain is paganic. It's any holiday in the West is going to be Christian in origin. That's just how the West, or at least Christian in some of its origins. That's just how the West has been formed. So Western holidays, American holidays that are highly commercialized, highly consumerist, highly secularized, highly defanged from religious or more nasty elements of its past. Halloween's an example of that. Are going to have Christian elements in them. What he is saying is a misunderstanding, flat out lie. I'm not saying it's a lie, but saying Christmas is only an adaptation of Christians is a lie. I didn't say that. I did not say that. I mentioned the winter solstice. I mentioned Saturnalia. I mentioned all of these different things. I mentioned Horus. I mentioned the significance of December 25th. I also mentioned that some Christians believed in the ancient Christian church that Jesus was born on December 25th. And I believe, and that Christians reappropriated the holiday when they became the most dominant power in the Roman Empire. So Insightful, you're not listening to me. And there's the history of Christmas. So you can watch that, and you can see that you weren't listening to me. So he gave a tiny bit of truth there. Christians already believe Christ was born December 25th. Not all Christians believe that. Many Christians today don't believe that. It's a commemorative holiday for many. Darshan, you can't say that because recent times I see that Pakistanis at least realizing that something bad is happening to them. How stupid can you be when literally India helped East Pakistan liberate? Okay then. Did the Spanish Reconquista influence the Italian Peninsula reunification efforts? It's too far, centuries before it. I don't think so. Let me see here. There is no concrete evidence that Columbus had Jewish blood. Actually, more recent evidence seems to suggest that Columbus was in fact a Sephardic Jew from Spain. But of course we see him more as an Italian because that's how he was culturally Italian. Which historically was very negative, almost completely negative, I would argue. See, that's your own bias. How do you know that's not your own bias for us against religion coming into the forefront? Religion has been a source of oppression, violence, and war, but so has non-religion. If the 20th century taught us anything, that secular governments are just as violent as religious governments, if not more so. Religion has been the source of charity, education, giving, help, things like that throughout the world. Many of the principles of equality before the law, due process, individual liberties came from interpretations of religious doctrines and ideas. Religious toleration, it was not practiced in the Soviet Union, but it was practiced in the Ottoman Empire. I mean, the Quakers were some of the first to advocate for the equality of all people, for instance. So it's not, and that isn't me being pro-religion. That's just me saying that religion, it's so overly simplistic to say religion has done nothing wrong. but it's also, but I never hear anyone really say that. And for other people to say religion is the cause of every major problem, that indicates a bias of a skeptic. I'm skeptical. I'm not a skeptic. I've often said that I believe in a higher power. I'm not going to share what nature that higher power has, but I don't. I sleep better at night believing there's a higher power. It makes more sense for how the world works, but that doesn't make me religious. That doesn't make me one religion or another. And as a historian, my job is to deliver information in an objective lens. People don't know my politics. They don't know my religion. They don't know my ethnicity. They don't know exactly where I am in the United States. They don't know my sexuality. They don't know my work history. They don't know my name. My identity. I'll reveal all of this when I hit 20,000. That's the goal. Get me to 20,000 subscribers and we'll talk. But my job is to be as objective as I possibly can about every single thing I talk about. Just check the minority numbers of both Bangladesh and Pakistan. See the percentage numbers, see who are more in danger. But Muslims in India say they are serious danger of hypocrisy. I'm not surprised by that. There's a huge appeals process in Pakistan, and the official penalties are enforced. Interesting. I will say that India is far ahead of Pakistan and India in terms of economic and social development. Why do you think 1 in 3 women in America experience SA in their homes? I don't know if that number is true. I just don't know enough about it. You know, I know that's what I was saying. Okay, let me see. Harry's just arguing with people. Hello, sir. What's the topic? Whatever history you want to talk about. With the exception of Scientology, all religions are based, or at least share persecution complex. Is it time to give Mr. Hubbard a chance? The Scientologists don't have persecution complexes? Don't they sue everybody who attacks them even slightly? Promoting Christianity used to mean violence in the slave era because slave owners would use God as a justification for their violence. That's true, absolutely. And see, I don't even have to answer that with the whataboutism of Christians being the ones who led the charges in slavery, and the Christian and Hebrew Bibles being, and Islam itself also fighting against slavery in many instances. Yeah, and the slaves themselves used Christianity. Nat Turner did to justify ending slavery. I would love a martini and a cigar right now. Thank you, Carcam. I'm good, Goose. Great to have you here. Can you discuss how silver and gold coins influence history? The devaluation of these currencies led to some of the biggest inflation crises in world history, most notably the one that destroyed the Roman Empire starting in the 3rd century. I'm Brazilian of Italian descent, and I hate that I'm here because of colonialism. Well, the Italians didn't go to Brazil to colonize, they went as immigrants. And there's a lot of Italians in South America because of Italian immigration. And how much of it is colonialism and how much of it is immigration. Why the West always hide, and if you want to know more, Siri, about Brazilian history, I have quite a bit. Why the West always hides itself when terrorism happens. No one from the West have not reported about that news. Why no West media reported? The West is extraordinarily anthropocentric, extraordinarily caught up in its own issues, and Australia gets more attention when it's kind of farther than Pakistan, from Great Britain at least. So, yeah. Let me see. Lupercalia is a fun Roman holiday. If you go back in time and change any particular point in Russian history, what would it be and why? I want Peter Stolypin to live. If Stolypin had lived, his reforms probably would have stabilized the Russian economy enough to prevent the Russian Revolution. I said it's very harmful towards society. How is it harmful towards society to promote a religion? Especially one, what is Christianity a violent religion? Is Islam a violent religion? The religions of the world, the Abrahamic religions in particular, are not overtly violent. They can be, but they're not overtly violent. Judaism isn't violent at all. You can say what you want about Israel right now. I don't know if that's necessarily following with Judaism. That's like, but then again, that's like saying the Nazis were Christians. When some of them were and some of them weren't. Israelis, some of them are practitioners of Judaism, some of them are not. It's a secular government acting in the terms of warfare. It's not an overtly Christian government. A better example of that would be the Crusades and jihads of the Middle Ages. Is Christianity really overtly performing it? Why is promoting any religion harmful to society would be my question for you, Faraz. Diwali? Yes, I've heard that before, Darshan, that the Indians celebrate Christmas. Okay, I'm not. I saw the Christmas video. I haven't seen the Varna system video, and I haven't seen the Hanukkah one. Why were such a large percentage of the Bolsheviks Jewish when Marxism viewed religion as an obstacle? Oh boy, here we go again. Everybody on the right, I don't know if you're on the right, but everybody on the right wants to pin Bolshevism on the Jews, or the far right, I should say. Bolshevism and their Jewish identity had nothing to do with it. Marx was the son of a very liberal rabbi, and he had nothing to do with Judaism. They were ethnically Jewish. They were not. They were not religiously Jewish. They have plenty much good proved he wasn't born in December. Most people agree that he was born sometime in April, May. No, they haven't proven that. Yes. So you can hate Columbus as much as you want, but the world would not exist in the way it does without Columbus. I'm sorry, and that's not, and for better or for worse. Let me see here. Excuse me. From what you know, do countries like with communist or socialist countries in history, or even have a high in religious affiliation? People still practice their religion, but it's subverted. Were the Crusades done in response to or in spite of anything specifically over a period of time? Muslim aggression against the Byzantines as well as towards Christian pilgrims triggered the First Crusade, and the Muslim reconquest of Jerusalem in 1187 triggered the Third Crusade, the one of Saladin and Richard the Lionheart and Philip of France, probably the most famous one. Excuse me. Do North Koreans know about other religions? Not that much. From what is Belarus aligned with Russia? If so, explain why. Belarus was part of Russia for a long time and has been part of Russia's political hegemony in Eastern Europe since the fall of the Soviet Union and the rise of the Russian Federation. And Lukashenko is good friends with Putin, and they're both cut from the same cloth. Both repressive dictators, kind of wannabe Stalins, wannabe Brezhnevs. See right there, none of the things you say have origin in religion. All of those positive things you said came from religion playing a similar role in society and religion being reformed. But they were religious activities. I mean, the first universities are built by the Europeans, the Islamic golden age of revolution. The Christian societies built the first welfare states. So I don't think any of that's done in spite of religion. And religion certainly isn't against any of those things. But I'm going to ask anyways, are you part of a formal religion or not? I'm not going to answer. I'm more of a three wise men person because of astrology. Fair point. You're obviously white or Caucasian, certainly talk like a heterosexual. Thank you. I am white, but which white ethnicity? I have so many, I'm very clearly white. People have confused me with being Mexican. I guess if, some kid in his basement can be, half Mexican and a white supremacist, I can be Mexican. Let me see. Will there come a day when Israelis also recognize the Afghans know that ISIS is gone from Afghanistan because we in India have good relations with Afghans, but we don't support Taliban rule? Then you don't have good relations with Afghans, Darshan, because they're ruled by the Taliban right now. Do you have a degree in history? Yes, I have a bachelor's and a master's in history. Thank you for joining us from India. Literally. Want to catch a flick sometime? Sure, anytime. In India, for goodness sake. I'm very sarcastic. I can become quite unfriendly if my mods bait me into it. I've gotten rage baited many times. Well, let me guide you, give you an example. The Nazis built roads and hospitals, and that doesn't make them good people. I'm saying that the institutions, many of the institutions of education, higher learning, charity, orphanages, schools were built and formalized and created by the church. It wasn't just that they were building these things because they existed before. They actually created the form of them. Orphanages, for example, universities, for example, are a creation of Western Europe. Yes, government obligations to society were part of that. But interestingly enough, in Western Europe, many of these were not run by secular authorities. They were run by the church. Because the church saw it as their duty to care for the poor, for children, for things like that. It's not that these things were sanctioned by the governments, but it was a part of a sacred realm. It was part of the works of the monks and the nuns and the friars and things like that. Monasteries were places of shelter and pilgrimage. I always forget what Lupercilla is. You explain it better than me. Islam is pacifist. There are many pacifistic Muslims who suffer at the hands of many non-pacifistic Muslims. Judaism, I think, is probably the most pacifistic religion. Now, there are many Jews who have been violent through the years, and the Jews invaded and conquered Canaan, and the Jews fought wars in Israel. But Judaism as a religion itself is generally in its own right, not violent. I wouldn't say Christianity is overtly violent at all. See, there you go. Jeez, Lincoln. Sorry, you went to the theater. As Hindu, I at least support my Christian brother. Than Muslims, I don't have good times with Muslims and Christians. At least Christians don't kill me because I am kafir to them. There's not that many Christians in India. To be fair, you might have a very different perspective if Christianity ran India. Why did God kill so many kids in the Bible? Deities killing kids sounds horrible, terrible to our offensive Western ears, which are heavily influenced by the Bible and Western Christian, Judeo-Christian ethics, common in ancient societies. Let me see here. You never clearly state what videos you wanted me to give. Hanukkah, Indian caste system, Christmas. You've given me 2 out of 3. Thank you. Can you provide a rundown of the recent events in your life and what you are hoping to change in 2026? 2025, we got monetized. 2024, I started the channel. 2026 is the year that this channel becomes my livelihood, becomes my main focus, and the thing that I do as much as I possibly can. That's the goal. Help me get there. Become a member, do a super chat, subscribe, like and subscribe, all of that. I'm doing well, Joe. I hope you're doing great. Did you know that Jesus in the New Testament says, don't think I came to bring peace, but I brought a sword? Did you know that New Testament says slaves should follow their masters with fear? Yes, of course. I've read the New Testament. I'm familiar with this. Yes, you have the story of Philemon in the New Testament, who was a slave master, who the slave was encouraged to return to him. The Roman society was obviously crawling with slaves. Christianity didn't encourage the end of slavery, at least not in its original position. Christianity had no religious power. It had no societal power. It had very little religious power in the terms of being a Jewish offshoot. Its cultural impact in ending slavery would have been nil, and slaves would have revolted and been killed. So practically speaking, Christianity had no way of ending slavery. And it fought to end slavery later on. It also, and yes, Jesus does indeed talk about that. And you, of course, have the book of Revelation with all the violence in there. There are many violent aspects to there are many violent parts in Christianity, and very many violent moments in Christian history, to be sure. I don't think that Christianity deserves a death stare for allowing slavery to continue in a society in which it was powerless to stop it. It's the Indian caste system video. It's not harmful to society in what way? Slaves obeying their masters, when slaves not obeying their masters would lead to the slave being punished and killed. Yes, you did free the slaves. It says women should submit to men, and Christians believe in it to this day. Yes, many Christians do believe in it to this day. I'm not a Christian apologist. I'm not here arguing about Christianity. I am looking at things in the historical and cultural lens from which they were written. Some of those things you could argue are harmful to society. Of course, you have to define what harmful actually is. The passage that talks about women submitting to men comes right after it says that men should sacrifice themselves for their women. So there's that too. I don't know that Christianity. I think that when you look at it, taking verses and saying this verse says this and this is bad, and therefore Christianity is harmful to society, is a huge, huge, giant assumption. That's like the passage. That's like saying that one passage in the Quran means that Islam is bad. There's many passages in the Quran that are very, very curious, to say the least, and startling. But in the Bible too, there are plenty. I like what's his face. I don't like him necessarily, but I heard Tommy Robinson talking about this once. Whatever you think of him, the British anti-Muslim guy. And he said, and somebody quoted verses about killing your enemy and things like this. And he said, I asked why you were reading the Bible. He says, I know what the Bible says, and I know my problem isn't with Christians. Christians aren't trying to kill me. Christianity certainly has plenty of things to explain. But that I don't know that means that the entirety of a religion is harmful to society when you consider the ethical values and the moral teachings and things like that could counterbalance some of those things. And Jesus talking about bringing divisions within families is certainly controversial, but is it necessarily harmful to society? I don't know. When you look at everything else. Most European countries are socialist and do not suppress any religion at all. True. What do you mean by socialist? Democratic socialism does not repress religion. Socialism, classic socialism, the old left certainly did suppress Christianity. Yeah. you wouldn't be inaccurate in saying Kabbalism was a part of the Bolshevik identity. Sabbatianism and Kabbalism does not find itself. I don't see that in Marxism. I don't. You have far more of Hegel and far more of secularism in Marx than anything else. And this is a man who called religion the opiate of the masses. And Lenin was a Jew and Trotsky was a Jew. That doesn't change anything. That's Einstein and Christ were Jews. Does this really? I really hate having to say this every live stream, but are we really going to lay everything at the feet of the Jew? Christianity and the Crusades were not pacifists, not even between themselves. That's very true. Christians slaughtered Orthodox Christians. Catholics did. Protestants and Catholics fought many civil wars in Europe. And of course, the Christians terrorized Jews all throughout Europe because they had killed Christ. What do you think about what Amon Hillman is saying? I don't know enough about him. What did I distort? Who destroyed the Library of Alexandria? I believe it was a Muslim general. Let me see here. Try to differentiate between a good Muslim to bad, some just hide the things of bad Muslims who do bad things. Well, there's many great and wonderful Muslims who follow incredible ethics, just like there are in almost every religion. Islamic Golden Age came when Islam played similar rules in the Islamic world, and Renaissance and Enlightenment when church lost its power, so the new ideas were religious in name, but not really. The Renaissance was not irreligious. The Enlightenment was, but the Renaissance and even the Scientific Revolution were promoted by religious figures. Although sometimes religious figures, it's give or take. You have religious figures promoting it, like religious figures like Kepler and Copernicus, but you also have the church suppressing Galileo. So it's not one or the other. I think you want it to be one or the other because you don't like religion. Same thing with the Islamic Golden Age, which was a flurry of mathematical, scientific, and religious discoveries under people like Averroes in his marrying of Aristotelian philosophy to Islam. And of course, you also have I forget his name, Karamzin, the man who invented algebra. The word Bolshevik simply means majority. Could it therefore be fair to say that the current Republicans leading the U.S. government are also Bolsheviks? Cute, but not true. It was a lie. It was a way that Lenin lied. Lenin lied throughout most of his life, but Bolsheviks were the minority of even the socialists in Russia. It was a way to represent strength when they had none. Yeah. Do you believe in the Copenhagen interpretation of particle physics? Sure, why not? Let me see here. Judaism isn't a pacifist religion like Jainism. Jainism is an interesting religion. I don't know much about it as I do about Hinduism, but it is Indian. Who was the first president to be born in a hospital? Was it Jimmy Carter? No. They might be Jimmy Carter or Gerald Ford. But the Afghan's economy is booming recently, and India has been aiding to Afghanistan, and Pakistanis are just jealous. I did not know that, Darshan. Thank you for sharing that. Why does Trump want war with Venezuela? Trump is, Harry would say it's because he's a lunatic, so Harry's probably already said that because I haven't caught up to the chat yet, so I'm just going to let Harry take this one. I don't want to analyze politics too much. I'll go into deeper analysis if you give a super chat, but the basic answer is ostensibly fears of narco-terrorism. What about this? Are you part of a recognized religious institution? I mean, that is vague. No. It's not answering it. Is La Virgen de Guadalupe the same Virgin Mary of the Bible? It's supposed to be. There you go. You got the case system. Thank you so much. So you can watch the case system video and learn more about Brahma. You can watch the in Hinduism, then you can watch the Hanukkah video, or you can come to the live stream lecture tomorrow at 4. Or no, it's going to be later. I'm going to be out at 4. It's probably going to be in the evening sometime. Did you get the bathroom from Hugh Hefner? No, but I am History Hefner. Any woman touched by a whip was said to be extremely fertile for the next year, so used to get women running into the street. The priest would... Oh, that's right. They would whip them. That's kind of weird. Yes, you're talking about Lupercella. If an all-powerful God was on their side, Christianity definitely would have had a way of ending slavery. I guess. I don't know. Sure. Yes. How many people would have died because of that? What that would have meant to do that? Probably would have been far more genocidal than the way slavery was ended by Christians. So that's the old argument that, well, God can just do whatever he wants, sort of thing. I suppose, from a Christian perspective. But that's not exactly how Christians or Jews or Muslims understand their God. Yeah. Yeah, Harry, I think you're getting a little too wily, a little too randy for this idea of priests whipping women. Most tribal members would say that missionaries are pretty harmful. Missionaries, if you study it, missionaries were not necessarily harmful. The soldiers that came with them and were forced to be with them were generally harmful. It was usually priests who, in America, under the Spanish, tried to stop the brutality of the Spanish soldiers. What is your IQ? Did you take an IQ test? No. I haven't ever taken one. I probably wouldn't score well. Let me see here. Erasing people's names, the Crusades killing people. There's been a lot of bad things like the witch burnings. Yes. Yes, that's true, Michael. Do you know how many witches were killed in Salem? How many witches do you think were killed in Salem? This number always shocks me. There are far more killed in Europe. But how many were killed in Salem? Yes. There are bad. Christianity has done bad things. Why does everybody act like I'm arguing from a Christian perspective? I'm simply pointing out some of the good things religion has done and some of the bad things because people were asking about it. Try on and bikini videos. Many YouTubers pick up. Well, maybe I can do a video where I put on the smoking jacket and explain how it turns me into History Hefner. True. But Tommy Robinson knew that the host was trying to bait him into acknowledging the Bible as violent. And there are many places of violence in the Bible. A lot of times, things like killing your enemy is a metaphor for looking inside yourself and getting rid of things that are hurting us. That's a fair point. I took an IQ test. They said I was brilliant and charged me $20 to join the Smartest People's Club. Yep. Do you have a plan on doing any collaborations? I don't know. We'll see. See who wants to do collaborations. I will probably do Discord collaborations with my moderators, and we'll do some sort of live stream there. Faraz wants to do a collaboration. He has an article that I need to put on my Substack. By the way, you can read my Substack articles. Hars, can you put the social media handles in the chat one more time? Do you ever doubt about written history? Was it real? I think that most of the events in history are legitimately real. I just think the interpretations are where we are wrong. But there is always the place for doubt. You look like Squilliam Fancy Some. Look it up. He does wear a smoking jacket, but I don't have the unibrow. Why don't we non-Muslim have a discussion? Islamic terrorism and share details, connect the dots. Fear. Fear in the East of being targeted, and fear in the West of being labeled. People do not want to talk about radical Islamic terrorism, and they should, because Islam itself is suffering from it. It's suffering a PR nightmare, and Muslim people all over the world are suffering because of it. Jainism is the predecessor to Buddhism. Was Buddha trained to become enlightened? He was following Jainist monk. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. Thank you, Harry. Trump is a lunatic. Wow, what a surprise. I called it. Kabbalism is considered secular because a large part of it is heretical. Orthodox rabbis accuse Marx and the organization who commissioned the manifesto of being Sabbatan. It's Jewish. It's Jew infighting, buddy. No, that wasn't the case. There's nothing Kabbalistic. There's nothing Jewish or of Judaism in Marx. If you want to go with some ultra-liberal, secular, reform Judaism, sure. But that's like saying that Christianity teaches communism, and Marx was secretly a Christian because of the Book of Acts, them sharing all things in common, that which Marxists love to point to. I mean, that's so... Marx was secretly a Christian and was promoting liberal Christianity. I mean, it's such an oversimplification. Marx was a Jew. He had no desire to bring the Jewish religion into his dialectical materialism. Let me see here. Candace Owens can't be trusted. Who can? I can. Please tell me the difference between socialism and communism. Socialism is an economic system, which is weird because communism is supposed to be the economic system. Communism typically takes the form of a more authoritarian government by which more radical socialistic measures happen. Socialism believes in redistribution of wealth, nationalization of industries, and in promoting... and in ending wealth inequality. Communism does a lot of these things usually by force. And believes in the collectivization, the joint ownership by all workers of all the means of production and labor, and basically in the lack of both believe in the lack of private property. Are you okay? I have no idea. I'm okay with you learning about history. Recently, the Pakistani army has, thank you for Darshan for sharing, has constantly been attacking the Afghans. A lot have been killed. It was very silly because proxy groups in Pakistan have somewhat connection with Afghanistan, but they deny that. Interesting. You should write a Substack article. No, you should not, Harry. Thank you, Emir, for joining us. And yes, those are our social medias. Please follow us there. In fact, it looks like we're almost to 80 minutes. I said I'd go for 2 hours, but it is getting late. And thank you, Emir. Thank you so much for the super chats and the support for the channel. Are there any links to linguistics, language, and spread of industrialization? Not off the top of my head. I can't think of that. I think common language obviously helps people spread, helps entrepreneurship a lot. Has anyone tracked the war brides from the World War II Japanese invasion of China? I haven't tracked them. Do you know history of Argentina? Yes, quite a bit. Argentina, settled by the Spanish, liberated. I think it's liberated in the mid 1820s, like many places are. There's a large influx of Italian, Jewish, and German immigrants there, like the United States receives. Um, it's one of the wealthiest and most populous countries in South America. Uh, yeah, I know a decent amount, not a huge amount, but a decent amount. Of course, you've got it's in a very important place for the Spanish. It's near the coast of, near the bottom and the Cape of Good Hope, or Cape Horn at the bottom of South America. Huge trade route there, and a huge exploration route during the Age of Discovery. Let me see here. Um, uh huh. Yeah. Hmm. Let me see. Going through my the chat here. You don't know you're too young. Marx was an initiate. Initiates are Kabbalists. Hemmer says androgyny is the main goal, and you have Trantifa commies running around. Pure Kabbalism, tum tum. Oh my gosh, guys! Candace Owens is here. Wow! Thank you for saying something that made no sense. Um. Anyways, and thank you for the gift memberships. Really appreciate it. Russia was founded in Kiev and has historical claim to retaking it. Or was Ukraine founded and Russia was an offshoot of Ukraine? Muscovy was built on the rise of Moscow during the Tatar reign in the 15th and 14th centuries. Can you apologize for your ancestors' wrongdoings? You certainly can, but why should you? Baroque architecture is synonymous with Catholic Church and brutalism of communism, what equates to capitalist America. Neoclassicalism is what you see in the Republican founding of America, small r by the way, in the late 18th century. Look at all the buildings. They're neoclassical, based on the Roman, Greek, and Egyptian architecture that became very popular in art at that time. Is this channel being funded by AIPAC, and is that how you get your laptop? Yes, I am clearly funded by AIPAC. The Jews are paying me to have a channel with 10,000 subscribers. Yes, clearly. Can you apologize for your ancestors' wrongdoings? Um, okay, it's okay, Faraz. We'll talk more about it later. Can we make Candace Owens our Secretary of Interior? Only if it's the interior of the moon and she has to live there. What happened to Benny's hot sister? I don't know. I never kiss and tell. First of all, I am as much criticized for Islam as well. I need to say that I have very negative experience with Islam, and I don't blame Wright for being Islamophobic. Well, I don't blame people for being bigoted towards a religion just because of bad people in the religion. I think that's a silly thing to do. Um, I know you're being fair. I'm saying that people who are skeptics, tend to think that they have objectivity because they're anti-religion. They're criticizing Christianity. They're criticizing Judaism. They're criticizing Islam. They're criticizing Hinduism. But the real truth of the matter is they may be just as biased against religion as people are for their religions. Set to abolish private ownership of homes, personal property, cars. Socialism is corporate ownership of land is a huge problem in socialism. That's why nationalization is such a big thing. You wouldn't even read it. Androgyny is the main goal. We live in the androgynous era to make God return. If you don't know about our extensive history of eunuchs, you don't know. Yes. I'm very well aware of what the word androgynous means. I'm also very well aware that you were brainwashed. Let me see. What is the craziest, weirdest thing Candace Owens has ever said in your opinion? Look at what Stinky Paradox wrote right above you, and I think that basically sums it up. There's a difference between defending Judaism in good faith and defending Jewish influence in American politics in bad faith, don't you think? Sure. We've talked about Candace a lot. I don't want to talk about her much more. Yeah, so I've talked about her 6 or 7 times. Hear me out. Look at Japan, 80% non-religious. They all have all the morality that many in the West say come from the religion. It proves that it doesn't come from religion, but does come from human instincts. That doesn't prove it. That's a correlative argument. That doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily causative. They're also 95% homogeneous. Is racial diverse or lack of racial diversity the key to it? That's what a lot of people on the far right say. But Japan is successful. But Japan is not as successful as you think. There's a lot of social problems in Japan. There's a dying population. They're militarily infinitesimally weak because of the United States. Japan has kind of been defanged in many of its geopolitical influences. Of course, it has a huge economic powerhouse, but it's dealing with a population that is dying. It's dealing with a lot of issues, and maybe non-religious people refusing to have children is actually hurting them. Populations that tend to become non-religious tend to have lower birth rates, and their populations tend to start dying off. as well as a large government that is able to redistribute wealth from rich to poor and old to young. Japan's nice morals come from the fact that they got nuked twice and occupied the United States. I don't know about that. Is Benny's hot sister Candace Owens? Funny, ironically enough, I actually thought she was quite attractive for quite some time. Now she's just a nut, but I would hear her years ago, and I wouldn't necessarily agree with everything she would say, but she was a mainstream conservative, and at least she was on the right. She was a MAGA, sort of person. And I was like, oh, she's good looking, at least. I can say that. But, I have an affinity for, never mind. But I don't have an affinity for nut jobs, I will say that. But no, she is not Benny's hot sister. We already settled that she's secretly a man. So what about Sweden? They are racially diverse, and they are one of the least religious countries. They have a very high quality of life. Not as much as you think. Again, you also have they are not racially diverse. They've been kind of forced into racial diversity in recent years, but they were not. Most of their wealth creation and things like that is not necessarily so. They are not a racially diverse country in the same way the United States is, or even Britain. Let me see. Let me see here. Japan's military is not weak by any scale of the imagination. Yes, it is. Well, compared to the Tories, it's not, and the Brits, because you guys are already weak. But to the United States, it certainly is. You had a crush on Candace Owens. Not really, and not even a few years ago. I just like, wow, she is good looking, but now she's a nutcase. I don't even think about that. You twisted my word. I didn't say they are doing good because they are not religious. I said they do have moral values. They can have moral values, but do they have moral values? What moral values do they have necessarily? So I wouldn't say that that's quite true. I'm not saying that, and I've never said that non-religious people can't be moral. I'm saying that religion can be a basis for morality, and often has been a basis for morality. And Sweden has a history of a particular form of morality. You could make this case that their morals come from. You're making the case that their morals come from their being non-religious. I'm saying that's not causative. Their morals could come from being homogeneous. I don't know if they're ahead of the United States in sexual equality. Let me see. They do have some of the happiest people in the world. So, unfortunately, the Brits do not. Do you have any friends who are real historians in the world? No. Let me see here. Please tell me the outfit came with a pipe of some kind. I have a pipe. I just don't use it on the channel. So, anyways, we've been going for almost 87 minutes. I said I'd do 2 hours, but I think that it's getting late. It's already 9 o'clock. So I should probably sign off. I know for Harry, it must be super late. He has to read 3 Telegraph articles about Donald Trump before he goes to bed. Yes, Japan's military is quite weak. It's been limited in its resourcefulness and effectiveness since the last World War, World War III. Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, thoughts on that? I mean, the legalization of marijuana federally will probably be the norm within 10 years. So you don't need a basis for morality. That's my point. You give religion credit for something that is just human nature. I never said that you needed religion to be a basis for human morality. I am saying that many of the charitable, I have never made the ethical argument, and I'm not making an argument. I am saying that in history, if we look at history, because I'm a historian, the truth of the matter is that religion has provided moral compasses for many societies, like Sweden, for instance, but has also been creative of many moral institutions or ethical institutions or socially necessary institutions. Saying that the church was responsible for the creation of many hospitals in the West is not the same as saying that the West needed Christianity to be religious. You don't need, or to be moral. You don't need a religion to be moral. Certainly, non-religious people are plenty moral. And I'm not even arguing from a religious perspective. I am saying from a historical perspective. I think this is, again, you're a skeptic. You don't like religion. That's fine. That's perfectly okay. I understand that completely. It's good to be skeptical. But I think you're biased from your skeptic position. Yes, that's because Japan has always been well prepared for an amphibious attack. Yes, they have good systems. Yes, the Japanese have good technology. That doesn't mean they would survive a war with China or North Korea. That's why they need the United States, just like the British have always needed the United States. Was King Solomon even a real historical figure? I would say most likely yes. What do you know about the occult practices, and especially King Solomon? Oh boy, here you go. The Japanese are ahead of the Americans in using karaoke to sing on the... Oh, for God's sakes. So please like and subscribe. Thank you. Yeah, too late because you can't hang in the debate. Brainwashed baby historian. You were talking about androgynous Trantifa a few minutes ago. I don't think that you're the one hanging in this debate. So, anyways, point being, Faraz, by the way, that people can be plenty moral without religion. Of course you can. I never argued that you can't. I'm saying that it provides a moral basis in many places. You can find enlightenment, and I've read every one of your comments, Stinky, and they're just getting stinkier and stinkier. You can find enlightenment and become a saint in any form of religion. There's 8 billion different paths to God. Okay, then, well, if you want to think of that, sure. I don't share it's not sharing my perspective. Thank you for enjoying my channel. I really appreciate that. It's always my pleasure, Mule Skinner. Is a British War of 1812 loyalist, Woodrow Wilson voter, and a trans-Tifa. Yes, I'm a trans-Tifa. That makes a lot of sense. That's how I know about Candaceans. How Nicholas II became a saint despite killing people during peaceful protests. He didn't actually kill people during peaceful protests. He became a saint because he was murdered by the Bolsheviks, and he was extremely pious. That's why the Russian Orthodox Church. Nicholas was Bloody Sunday is what you're referring to when Russian protesters were killed at the beginning of the 1905 revolution by Nicholas's guards. Nicholas wasn't present, and the guardsmen overreacted, and it's horrible what happened. Nicholas was not a good ruler by any stretch of the imagination. The bombing campaign from the Japanese using hot air balloons. No, I'll have to check that out. Yes, the British have always needed Americans. Yes, the British have always needed America. If they didn't need America, then why did they fight a war to keep them in their country? If they didn't need America, why did they fight a war so they could keep stopping their ships? Why did they keep stealing their sailors and their cargo in 1812? If the British didn't need America, why were they so terrified when Lincoln stole some of their foreign agents or some of their diplomats during the Trent Affair? If they didn't need America, why were they very, very glad when the Americans overwhelmed the Germans in the trenches? If they didn't need America, why did Churchill keep coming over here demanding that FDR join the war? Oh, and if they didn't need America, why did they take so much Marshall Fund money to rebuild their country that was buried by the Germans? Oh, I'm sorry, Harry. I'm just doing to you about America what you do to me about the Brits. If you didn't need America, I love this. That sounds fun to me. I should do a video about this now. Thank you, Harry, for inspiring a video about how great America is. I missed the last two comments. As a rebuttal to your Kabbalah denial. Started androgyny goals and Adam as a hermaphrodite as a man, Atum in Egypt, the Tutum sealed androgyny. Tun 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 sahor. Are you just saying brain rot stuff? Yes, I love how people try to argue with me over historical data. Let me see. They weren't terrified of America in 1864. In America, when Britain sent diplomats to tell them to do, America immediately backed off. Well, yeah, they were worried about Great Britain recognizing the Confederacy. That's just called good diplomacy. It's not backing off. You guys were just terrified of losing all your cotton that was grown on the backs of slave labor, even though you guys had already ended slavery, which is pretty morally compromised if you take it from my perspective. And good for Abraham Lincoln for, refusing to allow the Confederacy to negotiate with you guys, because you guys would have legitimized the Confederacy and kept slavery going in America. How dare you? So if you look at Britain and France, were the ones that did the majority of fighting in World War One. By the way, it's World War II. The Americans' impact was mostly moral. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. The Germans would have defeated the French and the British had the Americans not joined the war because they had taken off the pressure of the Russians. In fact, the Germans probably caused the Russian Revolution to be taken over by the communists. He didn't demand that America join the war. Really? That the new world, with all of its power and might, will come to the defense and the salvation of the old. I think Churchill knew exactly what he was doing. What's the Atlantic Charter? What's the Lend-Lease agreements? Churchill begged FDR for support. Begged him. He knew what he was doing. By the way, Britain could have easily gotten out of World War II in 1940, but we were too busy fighting Nazis, and Hitler's so sorry that pleased your ego. No, I'm glad you guys fought the Nazis. I think Britain's fantastic. I just think that that the British needed America. The British needed America to defeat the Nazis for them. The British needed the Americans to overwhelm the trenches. The British needed the Americans to hold them morally accountable when they wanted slave labor to continue so they could get the cotton they wanted for their textile mills. The British needed the Americans so that they could steal their cargo and their ships during impressment. The British needed the Americans to stay part of their colonial empire. They wouldn't have fought a war against them if they hadn't. That's not a demand. That's a statement given domestically in the House of Commons. Yes, it's a statement given domestically in the House of Commons. It's called wishful, hopeful thinking. If FDR had not gotten involved in the war, Britain would have been crushed. Sorry. I'm sorry. The Americans' mass productivity allowed the Brits to overwhelm the Italians and Germans in North Africa, and then D-Day. Try doing D-Day with the Brits. And I'll throw in the Canadians. You get Juno Beach. Throw in, let's do D-Day with just the Brits. How would that have gone? I don't even know why I'm arguing about this. I'm good at any subject related to the social sciences. I tend to be pretty good at. Yes, the Australians were also there. Make Canada's own president, put friendly neighbor history and problem. That solves our inflation issue. Forgetting the British could have gotten out of the war whenever it wanted. Yeah, I know that. Actually, that's not true. Not after the Never Surrender speech. That's not true. The Germans weren't going to let the British walk away peacefully after they made a fool of Hitler. Hitler wanted to do... Yes, I'm very well aware of that. Thank you for taking your history from Tucker Carlson. But I'm aware of that. It wasn't like Britain was begging the Germans for a peace deal and they refused. That just kind of proves my argument even more, because in that case, the Germans were trying to get the British to surrender. The British were unwilling to surrender because you're stubborn, like you are in the chat right now, and so the Americans had to save the British. I mean, let's see. Do D-Day. Do D-Day without Patton's army at Dover. Do D-Day without the fake of Calais. Do D-Day without Omaha Beach. So, how many Indians... Yeah, that's why they are wrong. It's obvious they're wrong. I mean, and if they don't say that, then they were lying to you. It's not history from Tucker Carlson, it's historical fact. It is historical fact that the British could have ended the war. I know that. I'm very well aware of that. Everybody knows that. And if they don't know that, then they're lying to you. I know that. You know that. Everybody knows it. But that's not my point. My point is the British needed the Americans to defeat the Germans. I'm not talking about they needed they wouldn't have defeated the Germans without the Americans. Britain didn't need to fight the war. Well, I'm glad that you're okay with the Nazis continuing to roll over Europe and do everything else that Nazis did. I'm glad you've exposed that you're okay with that. Your National Socialist side has indeed come out. Thank you so much, because you are a nationalist and a socialist at the same time, so I get it. I'm glad not Ramsay MacDonald, what was his name? Halifax would have been very happy with you. So who spilled more blood, the British, USSR, or Americans? The USSR. Russia won the war. In a way, they did. That's a very good point. I'm telling you, friendly history, when I have an argument with you, they at least make sense. Harry does it. Again, your entire point is bollocks. Why you don't need to use the war, so if we didn't, why does America need it? No, I'm saying once you started fighting the Germans, and once you really kept going and fighting the Germans, once you refused to end the war, you needed the Americans to win. You wouldn't have won the war without the Americans. Is there any situation in which the British Empire could have defeated the Germans, and the Italians, and the Japanese without the Americans? I'll wait. You probably would have lost both world wars in the 20th century had the Americans not shown up. Because if the German Empire, fighting everybody, could have withstood that, and then the Russians are taken out, there's no Eastern Front, the Schlieffen Plan could have worked, and the French would have had to surrender. And if you look at it, Hitler was actually quite content with keeping the British Empire because he thought he would stop Japan and the U.S. having it. Yeah, I know what Hitler thought. Hitler was an idiot. You're ignoring my entire point about World War II. No, I know your point about World War II. You think that the British should have resigned, should have given in to Hitler. So basically what you're saying is, without the United States, we wouldn't have needed you because we could have just surrendered. So your whole point is, without the United States, we would have just surrendered to the genocidal maniac who killed millions of people. So, he's fresh out of academia and buying all their illogical arguments, probably reads only English translations. I spent all of last night debunking academic opinions or Elagabalus. Opinion sources for Elagabalus. You mean the transgender emperor of Rome. So, anyways. If by some miracle Britain decided it was going to keep fighting on its own, then no, it wouldn't have won. What a shock. Yes, what a shock. You needed us. Just say you needed us and we can end the live stream and you can go to bed. It's not surrender, it's negotiation, and we would have got a pretty good deal out of it. No, you wouldn't have. And Hitler didn't honor any of his other deals. How do you know Hitler would have honored his deals with the British Empire? Yes, he was somewhat of an Anglophile, but I don't think that Hitler would have honored his deals with anyone. He didn't honor Barbarossa. He didn't honor it through Barbarossa. It's a non-aggression pact, and then 2 years later he's invaded your country. He didn't honor it with the Sudetenland. He didn't honor it with any other of the things. He didn't honor Versailles. Who would you ever debate, me or Harry? You're both extraordinarily stubborn and unwilling to listen. America couldn't do it without us. No, the Americans could have won the war without the British. They had an entire sea, an operation, and productive empire that was big enough to overwhelm the Germans. So, and I love the British, by the way. I mean, Hitler was pretty content to let Britain govern. So we're going to do a France and be a puppet government. How little you actually know about the Germans and the Nazis is quite startling. Well, your entire point is that Britain kept fighting to stop the genocidal maniac, and that's your problem because America had to come to help. Yeah, America had to save you guys and all the people who were being genocided. Yes. You want to know who I'm related to? History related to the guy who warned Paul Revere the British were coming. His name was John Dawes. Thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. Oh, come on. If Britain had got a peace treaty in 1940, it would have wrapped up royal defense spending and made the Royal Navy unbeatable and made the RAF one of the best in the world. I'm glad that you agree with Tucker Carlson. And millions of more Jews, gypsies, communists, Slavic people would have died. And who knows how long Hitler would have honored that deal for. Who knows what Italy's aspirations for would have looked like for British colonies in Africa with what they were doing in Ethiopia. He had a backhanded deal with the USSR when he planned to invade Poland, though they both betrayed Poland. No. He made a deal with the Soviets to divide Poland and to not attack them, and then he broke that deal. What's your favorite era of history? I love all history. I'm a Russian historian, particularly 19th and 20th century. I find fascinating. And then once you've done that, you used to show I'm idiot. I mean, Hars accuses you of being disingenuous, but that is actually disingenuous. Yes. So you've lost that argument. So now you're on to the argument of who's better to argue with. I think you're both I think you're both good arguers. I just think you're both incorrect. It's funny. I argue that the Americans lose the War of 1812, and I'm a loyalist. I argue that the British can't do anything without America, and since America has been created, and I'm too much of an American. It's not me being an American patriot. I'm just taking the argument that you would use for the British and applying it to the Americans. So, who would you rather debate? Who would I rather debate? I've debated Harry more only because he's so stuck in Anglophile land that he can't see the forest for the trees sometimes. But I think I would rather not do either. Proceeded to make a point, and then what point did I ignore? What point did I ignore? I'm still looking for the point I ignored. Yep, the alleged transgender emperor of Rome. I'm researching him, origin of emperor of ermine robes. Circumcised is always the language used, not necessarily a gallus, but inferred. Thank you for sharing that, Stinky. I didn't need to know any of that. You're a fantastic snowflake. Yes, and you're a Brit. The insults are about equal in power. Are you American? Why does the Russian history spark your interest? I don't know anything about Russian history. Does any of it play into how America originated? No. I just love the country, and I'm an American, but that doesn't mean I can't love the history of another country. I love the history of almost any country I study. So, Empire, you might like my video on the Russian czars, my tier ranking on them, if Hars can put that in the chat. You would also like my series I've done. I'm doing a current one on Russian history, and I've done one on the Russian czars, so you would really enjoy that. Are you cosplaying Hugh Hefner? No, I'm History Hefner. My entire point that Britain didn't need to fight World War II was just sort of glossed over. No, I know that Britain didn't need to fight World War II. I know that, yes, which would have inevitably led to the deaths of many more millions of people. It's a good thing Britain continued to fight the war, but they wouldn't have won that war without the Americans. They needed the Americans. Just say they needed the Americans. Just say they needed the Americans, and then you can go to bed. Or you can read your Telegraph articles. How accurate is it the claim that I've heard some political commentators make about Trump being compared to Boss Tweed? Interesting one. I'd have to look into more of that. Maybe. He's created a political empire. There's no doubt about it. Are you sure Hitler and the USSR wasn't aligned in invading Poland? Are you really sure about that? Yes, they were aligned in invading Poland, but they didn't double-cross anyone. They just surprised the entire world. And the British and the French, because they were too busy appeasing everyone, screwed up. Chamberlain was a fool. Reynal was a fool. Would you debate Ben Shapiro? If so, what subject? Would I debate Ben Shapiro? I would rather debate Ben Shapiro than Candace Owens. I'll say that. Or Destiny. I would debate anyone on any topic, but I want to debate history. I don't want to debate politics. And many of these people think that they are history, that their politics is informed by history when it's not. Probably who can talk faster. America does have very little history compared to the other countries in the world, but the British still needed them. Didn't America have to choke up Russia a little bit during the Cold War? We did have to check that. Yeah. I mean, America fought back against the Russians. There's no doubt about that. History is the path to true wisdom. I so agree. So again, Britain wasn't France. himself had a much higher opinion of Britain than he ever did France. Yes, that's true. Yes. I can't believe you've gotten to the point now, Harry, where on this channel you are actively trying to argue that that Britain is better because Hitler liked us more than he liked the French. That should be a point against the British, not a point for them. Native American history. Thank you for subbing, by the way. There are many different Native American tribes. Some of the American Republican government origins are inspired, at least partially, by the Seneca and the different Mohawk and the different Iroquois nation. Native American tribes were often named after the language they spoke, so Navajo, Sioux, and Iroquois do not refer to one tribe, but a collection of tribes based on their linguistic language. The Algonquin, too, from the first Thanksgiving. Go watch my video on the first Thanksgiving if you want to learn more about that. You look at history from a common and easiest defendable history opinion. I look at history from a try to understand the better perspective morally and overall in history. We see history different. Yeah, but I don't look at history as a moral argument. I look at history as an argument, but not a moral one. Jesus saved the world. Well, Jesus hopefully will save my chat from Harry. But he was pretty consistent and took his personal private life about his desire to keep Britain somewhat powerful. I understand that you want Hitler to be nice to the British, because without the United States, you couldn't have whipped that German SOB. So, yeah. Hello, RH. Oh, yeah, you need to know all of it, or else you're not interested in history. It's almost the most obscure aspect of our history. I'm the eunuch expert. You shouldn't blindly deny things you know nothing of. Your inability to get a date shouldn't turn you into an expert on eunuchs. I'm going to quote Qui-Gon Jinn from Star Wars. Your ability to type does not make you intelligent. Candace Owens would be tough to debate. She's smart as hell. Candace Owens is hard to debate, but she is not smart. She's manipulative. People who are manipulative are smart in a way, but they are not. It is a way of allegation and manipulation of the topic, of pretending you didn't say things that you said. People who you cannot quote to them and they won't own the quote, those people are difficult to debate. So yeah. Who's this musty clown? Obviously a dusty leader who's been marinating their own nonsense way too long. Thanks. I actually kind of like that compliment. No, that's not what I'm saying. You're twisting what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know what you're saying. You're just saying that Hitler would have been nice to the British. I get it. You think Hitler was a nice guy. Got it. Let me see. Are you aware of the poop raft? Put toilet paper in the toilet and then drop it. Oh, for goodness sakes. And you say that I'm a clown. Yes. Yes, that's a perfectly valid point. None of this disproves anything I've said. Thank you for proving my point even further. I'm in upstate New York from Coes, New York, which translates to falling canoe for the Coes, right, in the Hudson Valley. Well, that's fascinating. Again, many of the states, Mississippi, Miami, cities, states are named after Indian tribes, the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota. I have some friends in Australia. The new PC thing to call Aboriginals as First Nations people doesn't make sense to me because they were never a nation. It's a Canadian reappropriation. Yeah. Stop bringing up Candace Owens as King Crazy. Well, people are bringing her up. I'm not. You're Native American. Oh, wow, fascinating. I take it that those two nations have a population of one, and you are the only one because no woman would want to breed with you. Did Courier and Ives, the lithograph company, really outbeat other companies simply as a result of Reconstruction? Yes, carpetbagging was quite common where northern businesses would try to monopolize growing industries in the South. History is a fact that creates opinions. And also, I don't know what your obsession is with the Telegraph because it's managed by Michael Gove, who is a... Okay, fine. The Independent. There you go. Wasn't slavery a necessity to propel the U.S. to have a booming economy until 1863? No. It kept part of the American economy buoyant, but the American economy really shot off after slavery, not before. Did you read the letters Hitler wrote Churchill? No, I should, though. You're obviously not intelligent enough to debate if you have to resort to speculation over an inability to find a date. I like how you think everything is an argument. And not a joke, mate. Again, being disingenuous, trying to put words in someone's mouth and twist what they say. I'm razzing you and I'm rage baiting you because only because you won't say what is obvious, that the British needed the Americans to win the war. They wouldn't have won the war without the Americans. If that isn't disingenuous, I don't know what is. I'm teasing you because you are a nationalist who is also a socialist, and now you are saying that Hitler would have given favorable terms to the British. Possibly, yes. But again, I'm just going to say this. What makes you trust Hitler? No one should trust Hitler. You know what? This is going to be a 2-hour live stream. I was going to end 20 minutes ago, but this is too fun. Well, she does good journalism. I wouldn't attempt to classify her as a manipulator. She's in media. There's a shark field career. She has to be to exist. Brigitte Macron is a man. There is no moon landing. Science is not real. It's a cult. Ugh. My favorite snack is peanuts. Uh-huh. Nice. Sure, why not, RH? Who is your favorite ruler, emperor, president? Do you know any history about Jesus and the Romans around the time of Jesus' life? Favorite emperor? Napoleon. Favorite ruler, in the sense of being a monarch? Edward Longshanks. Favorite president? Abraham Lincoln. At least in the American perspective. Favorite French president is de Gaulle. And Churchill is my favorite British prime minister. My favorite Russian Tsar would be Peter the Great. Yes, I do know about the history of Jesus and the Romans around the time of Jesus. Obviously, Augustus is when he's born, and Tiberius at his death. If you're I should do a video about this near Easter, but Pontius Pilate, the man who killed Jesus, or the governor who is cited as the man who is responsible for his death, was part of a group that had supported Sejanus, the leader of the Praetorian Guard, who had fallen out of favor and been killed by the emperor. And so Pilate was potentially worried about a Jewish revolt, and that would have ruined his life and killed him. So that is one of the reasons, supposedly in the New Testament, he gives in to the demands to have Jesus executed. I grew up in the same neighborhood as the Musty Clown. Oh, he was homeschooled, but got expelled for, well, yeah, I was quite randy back then. What is carpetbagging? I think I work as a fraud analyst, but I haven't heard that term in a long time. Carpetbagging refers to people from the North who sought economic and social opportunity in the South after the Civil War during Reconstruction. Germany had the genius and early designs, but lacked the time to fully realize their rocket potential into a war-winning capability. That's true, but they were working on an atomic weapon. But they didn't need the Americans if they didn't fight the war, which is my point. And that's why I said, in order to win the war, you needed the Americans. I just love how you're trying to find a loophole that just doesn't exist. But you know what? Fine. You didn't need the Americans because you could have just ended the war and millions of more people would have died and Hitler probably would have double-crossed you. But I'm glad that you feel better about that. So if he negotiated a peace and a deal with Britain, he wasn't going to violate it like he did with the Soviet Union. I don't believe that. I just don't. Why do you trust the man? The man has been dead for 80 years, and you're trusting him to actually honor his deal. Like he honored his deal with the British over the Sudetenland, and then invaded Poland. He honored Versailles, which was the deal with the British. Are you kidding me? Fun fact, a guy named David, and he certainly didn't like Churchill. A guy named David Warther had spent over half a century recreating every ship from the age of ships before motor power from ivory. Yeah. If you're going to deny my claims and allege I am insane, better have a substantial argument for it's best to refrain. I never heard your arguments before. They don't have any basis in any historical understanding of any of the events, be they with Elagabalus or with Marx. And androgyny has nothing to do with Judaism. What's your perspective on Putin? I think he's a paper tiger. I think he's trying to reinvent the power of the ancient Russians and the Russian Empire, and he's not getting it. What is your and China's leader, as well as North Korea's? China is far less aggressive than people think it is. North Korea, a little bit of a paper tiger. Jeopardy would be fun. I watch Jeopardy every day. Where does the sun go at night? It goes to my house, and we play a poker party with the moon and the stars and Uranus. What is your favorite North Korean leader? I don't have one. Stalin was worse, but Hitler was still brutal, and the scientists made meth. Yes, they were on most of the Germans were on amphetamines. Hitler was actually quite mad by the end of the war. He was so mad that he would actually agree with Harry and not me about this whole argument. Hello, friendly history. Hello, Simon. It does exist. Britain could have gotten a negotiated peace deal at any point if they wanted to. This is a commonly known thing that Hitler would have made a deal with Britain at nearly any point because he didn't want to fight Britain. Yes, but he did fight Britain, and he fought them pretty well, pretty successfully for the most part. And they didn't do that, and maybe you think they're stupid for doing it. I think they're brave for doing it, but I think they needed the Americans. So on the one end, you basically say Hitler would have been a man of his word, which he wasn't. And we could have gotten a peace treaty any time we wanted, so we didn't need the Americans to fight the war. No, I never said that. I said you needed the Americans to win the war. Does France have a strong military power compared to Britain? Somewhat, but not as much. Like, it's not some loophole that doesn't exist. It's there. It's just you won't accept it because you think that Britain has always been dependent on America, which is bollocks. Yes, in order to defeat the genocidal maniac who killed 11 million people in a genocide, as well as a war that killed tens of others of millions of people, you needed the Americans. Get over it. Why is Abraham Lincoln your favorite president? When he had zero respect for states' rights. Poor immigrants would have eventually Congress to end slavery without war because of job opportunity. No, slavery had become too entrenched into the sovereign society and needed to be uprooted. Every single argument for the Confederacy and its existence and for the Civil War that is not directly about slavery is indirectly about slavery. And Lincoln was brave, patriotic, and did an excellent job running the war, except that he had horrible commanders. The other times he double-crossed people in which he would have been had a different opinion of them publicly and privately. Yes, and how do you know that Hitler had a different... I mean, Hitler respected the British Empire. There's no doubt about it. I'm not saying he would have definitely done it. I'm saying, why are you trusting him? Yeah. Thank you, RH. The robe makes you look smart. Thank you. I don't need a robe to make me look smart, but thank you, Tripical. I don't know why the debate if America was needed in World War II matters. Does arguing they weren't needed give something? Well, it's Harry. So, Great West, you're probably not familiar with the channel. It's the first time I've seen you. But Harry, who is an excellent British historian and knows a great deal about the British Empire, is an Anglophile, like an insane egomaniac Anglophile who thinks that the British almost never do anything wrong and are superior in almost every way, shape, or form to other countries. And because of this, it's very hard for him to admit the simple fact that the British needed the Americans in every step of the way. From the creation of the United States onwards, the British were dependent upon the Americans. And I'm only being half serious when I say that. I don't think that's fully defensible, but it is quite an interesting theory. And developing it just on the fly, I actually realized that it's kind of true, but for some reason, Harry took the worst example he possibly could, World War III, which you probably call World War II. I think there's 3 world wars, and said, no, that's when the British didn't need the Americans because we could have just surrendered. When this guy constantly craps on the French for surrendering too much. Look at his private letters. Look at all the documents from the meetings of the Nazi argument. He was committed to a deal. There's a very low chance that he would have broken it. No, you don't know anything. You just don't know the man. Science. You do something the same way, even if you change some of the controls, you get similar results. Hitler could have easily broken that deal. You don't know that he would have broken the deal, and I don't know that he would have broken the deal. Your argument is, on the one end, I don't want to admit the British needed the Americans, so I have to say we could have just surrendered. We could have just pulled the French on them and surrendered. Until he had effective world domination, which wasn't going to happen. Even the Americans weren't that thick to let that happen. Yes, the Americans weren't going to let that happen, but thank God he didn't even get European domination because of the Americans. And by the way, without the British, he would have crushed the Soviets. No doubt about it. It's in the sources, dummy. Of course, it has historical backing. So which sources? Which sources are you referring to? It would have been surrender. The Germans asked Britain for peace. That's not surrender. They would have stopped fighting the war, and the Germans would have come out successfully. That's surrendering. Yes, that is surrendering. That is surrender. They would not have defeated the Germans. They would have lost their attempt to stop the Germans, which is what they did when they went to war, when the Germans attacked Poland. Surrendering is suing for peace and taking whatever deal you're going to deal, and that's not what would have happened. Yes, they would have taken it. Yes, that's what he wanted them to do. He wanted them to accept the deal he would have offered them. That is surrendering. That is the definition of surrender. Who would have won in the war after World War II? The Soviet Union or the United States? I say the U.S. Yes, but it would have been close, and the suffering would have been horrible. Do you believe in human rights? If so, do you believe abortion should be abolished in the U.S.? This is a history channel, sir. This is a Wendy's. Of course I believe in human rights. Abortion is a political issue I don't want to get into right now. You need a call line for Harry to call and debate you. I just don't understand why you have to die on the hill that Hitler would have made a deal with the British. You don't know how surrender works. No, that's not true, Harry. Hitler would have given them favorable terms. He wouldn't have given them nothing. So when Lincoln talks about giving favorable terms to the South, was the South surrendering? When they stopped fighting and stopped trying to stop the North, that's a surrender. Lincoln would have given them favorable terms. Andrew Johnson certainly gave them favorable terms because he was an idiot, but Lincoln would have been a little smarter with his terms. My point is that we would have lost effectively nothing. I don't know about that. That's not necessarily true. They asked for peace, not the other way around. So by definition, it can't be a surrender. Yes, it's a surrender. You guys would have surrendered. You would have stopped fighting, and you would have failed to achieve your goals. Hitler would have achieved his goals in getting you out of the way. I don't think you can see that as just, that's just a peace deal. No, that's a surrender. The British would have been the ones ending the war. So, no, you can't have my milkshake because my milkshake brings all the boys to the yard in daylight, and it's better than yours. So why have I never in history seen a skinny person drinking a Diet Coke? Wasn't that Trump who said that? Oh God. Yes, when Britons abandoned Norway, it was a surrender. That is true. And when when they abandoned Dunkirk, when they abandoned other, I mean, Britain lost huge segments of area to German and Japanese incursions during the war and had to retreat. They retreated in North Africa. Yes, the British would have lost the war by that standard. The Germans would not have been stopped. Hitler's Wehrmacht would have been able to keep going, and there would have been no one to stop him. If that's what you want to accept as your terms for surrender or whatever you want to call it, in order to say we didn't need the United States, then so be it. The moral weight of that, from a historical perspective, is astronomical. The philosophical weight, astronomical. But if you want that so that you can say we didn't need the Americans on the worst possible technicality, which isn't even that good of a technicality, then go ahead. I'll allow you. But that means a genocidal maniac gets to do whatever he wants in Europe. The British didn't allow the French Napoleon wasn't genocidal, but didn't allow the French to do that, but they allowed the Germans to do that. No, yes, and then no, you didn't. You needed the Americans. That's why Patton was there. Can you teach me the milkshake? No. Like and subscribe and give a super chat, and then I'll consider it North Star. Also, the Napoleonic War is considered the First World War. I really don't care if America was needed or not. All that matters is that World War II ended ASAP. It's World War III. The First World War is the 7 Years' War, French-Indian War. Explain why poor whites wouldn't have eventually go to Congress to abolish slavery when their wages were depressed because of it stemming from competition. They wanted to end it, but those were in the North. That wasn't a phenomenon in the South. Battle of Al Alamein, yes. What a peace deal that says you keep your entire do whatever you want. You just don't go get in Germany's way. Your job in the war was to get in their way. If you can't do what you wanted to do during the war, that's losing. Yes, it's not an overwhelming slap, but it is a surrender. It is a loss. It is technically a loss. Since you're focusing on technicalities, I'm a focus on technicalities. You're supposed to say, I can teach you, but I have to charge. Oh, yeah, I do have to charge. Well, I literally said, give a super chat. There's your charge. These people are so dumb. The U.S. was very much needed in Western Europe. I don't know why. This is how bad nationalism is. If anything has turned me against nationalism, it's people who basically are so hell-bent on defending their nationalism that they have to say, my nation didn't need your nation because we would have gotten a good peace deal and millions of more people would have died and suffered. Can you imagine the suffering of the Jews in Eastern Europe and the rest of Europe and in France if Hitler had won? What would he have done to Spain? What would he have made Franco do? What would Mussolini have done in Africa? What would have happened to the Middle East? What would the Grand Mufti in Palestine have done to the Jews there who wanted to work with Hitler? We didn't have a Nazi government imposed on us, did we? No, thanks to the Americans. So it's not technicalities, it's definitions. Well, you need a dictionary. I just figured out what I'm buying you for Christmas. It's not like we capitulated as it weren't a French that basically just got told whatever it was supposed to do. Again, I'm just gonna let it go. I'm just gonna let it go. I mean, so you needed the Americans to beat the Nazis. You needed the Americans to beat the Germans before that. You needed the Americans so you could steal our cargo and impress our ships during the War of 1812. You needed the Americans so you could get cotton from the backs of slave labor despite being anti-slavery in the 1860s. You needed the Americans to continue paying very, very minimal taxes on tea and not to offend you by throwing it into a harbor. So the British have needed the Americans every step of the way. If you want a half-hearted argument that is somewhat sarcastic for me has just become the bane of your existence, Harry. Mussolini got bailed out by the Germans on everything he ever did. Yes, just like the British got bailed out by the Americans in the entire war. I mean, the guy struggled to take over Ethiopia, he struggled because of the British and the Americans forcing him to struggle. Yeah. So, you don't have to call it World War III Great West if you don't want to. It's just what I consider it to be. So, and it's hard for me to say World War II, but I will call it that occasionally just for the sake of what's going on. And look at that. We got over 2 hours. And Harry, you need to go to bed because it's 2:30 right now, and your parents are going to be mad. By the way, the taxes levied on the American colonies were to pay their own costs, not to give Britain any money. No, the British needed money because they were broke after the war, because they had to fight a world war, and they won it, and they did a great job winning it, but they had to pay a war, or any extra money to help pay it down. The guy struggled. So, yes. We all know, Harry, we all very much know that the British really, really were broke after that war. The Middle East was already ruled by the USSR and Britain in the early 1910s, 1950s. The US later took control through soft power. Not true, but okay. What about the Nephilim? Oh, you mean biblical giants? Look at any other ancient civilization. The Native Americans have legends of giants. People believe in powerful beings and creatures throughout the entire world. Yeah. Yes, the British need. So you needed American taxes, and the Americans didn't want to pay the taxes. So then a revolution happened. So you needed America to stay in. So over very, very small taxes, you fought an 8-year war, brought in countries from all over the world, lost the colony. Then you tried to steal cargo and ships and sailors from from that country. That led to another war, which you won, but didn't smack down the Americans like you think you did. And then, I came around a little bit. And then you needed slave labor to produce cotton for your textile mills, and the Americans weren't going to have any of it. So yeah. Oh yes, Al Bali, great singer. Which is why the American government levied taxes on American colonies, which is to make sure that they were contributing as much as they were receiving, not to give the government extra money. Yes, I understand that. Who took control of the Middle East during the era then? Not the Soviet Union. The British and the French divided it up. Let me see. No, in the War of 1812, we were busy focusing on Napoleon. When we beat Napoleon, America for peace because they're a bunch of wimps. Are you right? No. Are you... Yes, the British were able to defeat both the Americans and the French. I never said the Americans won that war. You're making the argument now that I'm saying the Americans won the war. The Americans did not win the war. The Americans... The British needed to steal cargo and ships and sailors from America to fight they needed the Americans, once again. My whole point is they needed the Americans. I don't care about the historical results. They needed the Americans. When that man is gone dead, recorded 2 weeks. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Great West. So, anyways, Horace will be happy about what I said about the War of 1812. I'm going to sign off. I don't know what time I'm going to be on tomorrow. Probably 7 or 8 tomorrow. I don't know when I'm going to be home tomorrow, but when I am home, I will be doing a live stream lecture on the history of Hanukkah, which I was going to do last week. Very appropriate for the Bondi Beach shooting, but wasn't able to get to it. What about the Italian Wars? What Italian Wars do you want to know about? Hi, Quentin. I'm sorry, we're just signing off right now. We did a 2-hour live stream answering all your questions about history and social sciences. I'm tired. My throat's scratchy, and we went on for a very, very long time. What is the Bondi thing? The beach shooting in Australia. The Italian Wars were fought between 1848 and 1861 in South Piedmont, Sardinia, along with the help of other Italians such as Giuseppe Garibaldi and the influence of the French and others were able to gain their independence and create their own country in 1861. Why do you think Europeans are so cocky when most of them haven't been great power since the end of World War II? If it wasn't for the U.S., they would be Russia's playground. I don't know. I'll let Harry answer that. France and Spain fought over the Vatican. That's true too. What time again? Time zone. I'm always, everything I say is Eastern Standard. So if I'm saying 8, that's what? 6 o'clock in Nevada, like Las Vegas. In Britain, that's like way later. It's 9:41 right now. So yeah. Anyways, you're a disingenuous person. I now agree with Hart. Well, you lost the argument, so you're calling me disingenuous. I have a tobacco pipe. I'm just not using it right now, but maybe I'll use it tomorrow. You know what? That'll be fun. Do a live stream lecture about the history of Hanukkah and use a tobacco pipe, lights, festivals, things like that. And yes, I do like a good tobacco pipe. Anyways, I hope everybody has a really, really great rest of their evening. Take all of the knowledge and information I've given you, go out clubbing and impress the love of your life or friends, or watch a good historical movie and just chill tonight. I'll see you all tomorrow evening for the live stream lecture on Hanukkah. I'll let you know ahead of time when that's going to be. Yes, people have asked good questions. We do it all the time here, Bleaks. Europeans are cocky really well. If it's true that at least they were not fake. Okay. Maybe do the Opium Wars. I've talked about them before. Go watch my live stream lecture from 3 weeks ago about the fall of the Chinese Empire to learn about the Opium Wars some more. But take care. Have a great rest of your evening, everybody. And as always, like and subscribe on your way out to become a friendly neighborhood historian. Watch all these short-form content, long-form content. I really appreciate all of you and everything you do for this channel. And as I sign off, remember, love history. Bye now.